Elena Ward stood in the cemetery rain, staring at her father's fresh grave, when the lawyer whispered the impossible condition: marry within 3 months or lose everything. She'd fled Chicago 6 years ago after Victor Hale publicly destroyed her heart. Now his name appeared on the inheritance paperwork, not as a memory, but as a requirement. The city's most feared crime boss held the key to her survival, and their past humiliation was about to become a binding contract written in blood and desperation. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below and hit that like button. I want to see how far Elena's story travels. Now, let's begin. 7. The rain fell like accusations. Elena Ward stood beneath a black umbrella that did nothing to shield her from the cold, watching as they lowered her father into Chicago soil. The cemetery stretched gray and endless around her, filled with monuments to power, wealth, and the kind of legacy that demanded blood to maintain. She'd known this day would come eventually. Vincent Ward had lived violently and loved nothing more than control, but she hadn't expected to feel this hollow watching him disappear into the earth. 6 years. She'd stayed away for 6 years, building a life in New York that had nothing to do with Chicago's shadows or her father's empire. She'd become someone else entirely, sharp, successful, untouchable. A businesswoman who commanded boardrooms and closed deals with precision that would have made Vincent proud, if he'd ever bothered to notice. But he hadn't, not when it mattered. Now he was gone, and Elena was back in the city that had once chewed her up and spit her out with such spectacular cruelty that she'd sworn never to return. The funeral was sparsely attended, a handful of old associates who looked more relieved than bereaved, a few distant relatives she barely recognized, and the lawyers. Always the lawyers circling like well-dressed vultures, waiting to divide the spoils. She recognized Martin Reeves immediately. Her father's lead attorney for 30 years, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, standing at a respectful distance with a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. He caught her gaze and nodded once, a gesture that said everything she needed to know. There would be conditions. There were always conditions with Vincent Ward. The service ended with practiced efficiency. A priest spoke words that meant nothing about a man he'd never known. People filed past, offering condolences that landed like stones. Elena accepted them with the same polished grace she used in business negotiations, her face a carefully maintained mask of appropriate grief. When the last mourner departed, Martin approached. "Miss Ward." His voice was professionally neutral, but she caught the undercurrent of something else. Caution, maybe, or warning. "We need to speak, privately." Elena glanced at the grave one last time. Rain pooled on the fresh earth, turning it to mud. "Your office?" "I think somewhere more secure would be appropriate." Martin's expression didn't change, but his grip on the portfolio tightened. "Given the nature of your father's final arrangements," the first thread of unease wound through Elena's chest. "What arrangements?" "Not here." Martin looked around the cemetery with eyes that had learned to see threats in shadows. "There are ears everywhere in this city, Miss Ward. You've been gone long enough to forget that." She hadn't forgotten. She'd just hoped distance had changed the rules. Martin's car was a town car with tinted windows and a driver who didn't make small talk. They drove through neighborhoods Elena remembered from childhood, blocks where her father's name had meant something, where deals were made in back rooms and loyalty was purchased with fear. Chicago looked different in the rain. Harder. Less forgiving. They didn't go to Martin's office. Instead, the car pulled up to a private club in the financial district, the kind of place where membership cost more than most people earned in a year, and discretion was the only currency that mattered. The driver opened Elena's door without a word, and Martin led her through a side entrance that bypassed the main lobby entirely. The room he chose was small, windowless, and soundproofed. A conference table, 2 chairs, a single folder waiting on the polished surface. Elena sat. "Tell me." Martin opened the folder with careful precision. "Your father's estate is complex." "I assumed as much. What you may not have assumed is that you are the sole heir." He slid a document across the table. "Everything. The businesses, the properties, the offshore accounts. All of it transfers to you upon his death." Elena stared at the papers without touching them. "There's a but coming." "Several, actually." Martin's mouth thinned. Your father built an empire that exists in the spaces between legal and illegal. His associates expect continuity. His enemies expect weakness. And his family. I'm his only family. Not quite. Martin pulled out another document. Your cousin, Marcus Ward, has been managing day-to-day operations for the past 3 years. He believes himself to be Vincent's successor. He's made alliances, promises, arrangements based on that assumption. Elena's jaw tightened. She remembered Marcus, arrogant, entitled, exactly the kind of man who would mistake proximity to power for actual competence. My father left everything to me. Marcus can believe whatever he wants. It's not that simple. Martin's tone shifted, becoming almost apologetic. Vincent knew Marcus would fight the inheritance. He knew the entire structure would collapse into civil war the moment he died. So he added, protections. What kind of protections? Martin met her eyes. You must marry within 3 months of his death. The marriage must be to someone approved by the Board of Family Associates, someone with the resources, connections, and reputation to stabilize the transition of power. If you fail to meet these conditions, the entire estate transfers to Marcus by default. The words landed like a physical blow. Elena leaned back in her chair, processing. He put a marriage clause in his will. He put a survival clause in his will, Martin corrected quietly. Vincent knew you'd been gone for 6 years. He knew you'd built a different life. But he also knew that the moment he died, you'd become a target. Marcus isn't the only one who wants control of the Ward Empire. There are people in this city who would kill you just to create chaos. So his solution was to force me into marriage. Elena's voice was ice. His solution was to give you leverage. Martin pulled out one more document. This one was different. Heavier paper, formal seals, multiple signatures. He arranged for a meeting. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., the Apex Building, penthouse suite. The city's major power brokers will be there to discuss the transition and to present potential candidates. Elena's stomach turned. You're telling me my father arranged a marriage auction? I'm telling you he arranged a negotiation. Martin's expression held something that might have been sympathy. You have 3 months to choose a husband who can protect you and stabilize the empire. Or you have 3 months to figure out how to survive Marcus and everyone else who sees you as an obstacle to power. Those are the same thing. Yes, Martin agreed. They are. Elena stood, walking to the far wall, needing distance from the papers that spelled out her father's final act of control. Even dead, Vincent Ward was moving pieces on a board she couldn't see. Who are the candidates? She asked finally. Martin hesitated. There's a list, 7 names, men with the resources and reputation to make the marriage legitimate in the eyes of the associates. Show me. He slid one more paper across the table. Elena picked it up, scanning names she half recognized from her father's old world. Crime families, political machines, corporate empires built on foundations that wouldn't bear close examination. Then she saw the last name on the list and the room tilted. Victor Hale. Her hand tightened on the paper hard enough to crumple the edges. No. The word came out flat and absolute. Martin watched her carefully. Miss Ward? Not him. Anyone but him. Victor Hale controls half the city's underground economy, Martin said quietly. He has connections that reach into every major institution. Police, courts, city government. If you want protection that actually means something, he's the only real option on that list. He's not an option. Elena's voice shook with something between fury and panic. I don't care what he controls, find someone else. There is no one else. Martin stood, gathering his documents with the careful movements of a man who'd delivered bad news before. The other names are window dressing. Men who'll take your father's money and leave you vulnerable the moment it's convenient. Victor Hale is the only one with the power to actually keep you alive. You don't understand. I understand that 6 years ago, something happened between you and Victor Hale that sent you running to New York. Martin's tone was gentle but unyielding. I also understand that whatever happened doesn't matter anymore. Your father's estate is worth $800 million. Marcus wants it. So do half a dozen other groups who see Vincent's death as an opportunity. You need protection that Marcus can't buy, bribe, or kill. That means Victor Hale. Elena turned away, staring at the blank wall, fighting memories she'd buried deep. 6 years ago, she'd been younger, softer, stupid enough to believe that wanting something badly enough could make it real. She'd fallen for Victor Hale with the kind of intensity that only happens once in a lifetime, swift, consuming, inevitable as gravity. She'd thought he felt it too, the way he looked at her at her father's parties, the conversations that stretched past midnight, the almost touches that promised everything. Then came the gala, Chicago's annual charity event where power dressed in formal wear and pretended civilization. Elena had worn red, a dress that cost a month's salary and made her feel beautiful, dangerous, alive. She'd found Victor on the terrace, alone, looking out over the city. She'd told him how she felt, simple, honest, reckless, and Victor Hale had looked at her with eyes colder than the winter wind and said 6 words that carved themselves into her soul. "You're not worth the complication, Elena." Then he'd walked away. In front of everyone who mattered, in front of the entire social circle that had watched her grow up, he'd rejected her so publicly, so completely, that the humiliation had been total. She'd fled to New York the next day and never looked back. Now Martin was telling her that man, that specific, cruel, impossible man, was her only option for survival. "The meeting is tomorrow at 2, Martin repeated, moving toward the door. "I'd suggest you attend. Even if you have no intention of choosing Victor, you need to understand what you're up against." He paused at the threshold. "For what it's worth, Miss Ward, your father believed you were strong enough to handle this. He wouldn't have structured the inheritance this way if he thought otherwise." "My father believed control was love," Elena said quietly. "He was wrong about a lot of things." Martin nodded slowly. "Perhaps. But he was right about the dangers. Don't underestimate them." Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone with a list of names and a past she couldn't escape. Besem. The hotel room felt like a cage. Elena had chosen the Park Regency because it was neutral territory, expensive enough to be secure, anonymous enough to be safe. She spent the night reviewing documents Martin had left her, trying to map the empire her father had built from pieces that didn't quite fit together. Vincent Ward's legitimate businesses were impressive: real estate development, import/export companies, a chain of high-end restaurants. But the papers Martin included also showed the other side: money moving through shell corporations, properties that existed only on paper, business partnerships with men who had rap sheets longer than their resumes. Her father had built his fortune in the gray spaces between legal and criminal, and he'd done it with ruthless efficiency. And now it was hers, if she could keep it. Elena closed the files as dawn broke over Chicago, painting the skyline in shades of gold and shadow. She hadn't slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Victor Hale's face, 6 years younger but no less dangerous, looking at her like she was a problem to be solved rather than a person to be loved. "You're not worth the complication." She'd built a life on those words, used them as fuel to become someone who would never be dismissed again, someone sharp enough, strong enough, successful enough that no man could look at her with contempt. And now she had to face him and ask for help. The irony was almost too bitter to swallow. Elena showered, dressed in armor disguised as a Dior suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, the kind of outfit that said professional and untouchable in equal measure. She did her makeup with precision, creating a mask of confidence she didn't feel. By the time the car arrived to take her to the Apex building, she looked like exactly what she'd become: a woman who commanded respect and gave nothing away. The Apex building dominated Chicago's financial district, 60 stories of steel and glass that reflected the city back at itself. Elena had been here before, years ago, when her father still thought she might be useful to his empire. She remembered the penthouse suite, all leather and dark wood and windows that turned the city into a possession. The elevator ride felt like ascending to execution. When the doors opened, she stepped into a room full of predators dressed as businessmen. They turned as one to watch her enter. Elena recognized some faces from her father's old circle, men who'd grown older but no less dangerous. Others were strangers, but the calculation in their eyes was universal. They were measuring her, weighing her worth, deciding if she was an asset or an obstacle. Elena lifted her chin and walked to the head of the table with steps that didn't falter. "Gentlemen," her voice carried, "thank you for coming." "Miss Ward." The speaker was Lorenzo Gotti, one of her father's oldest associates, 70 years old with eyes that had seen everything and forgiven nothing. "Our condolences on your loss." "Thank you. We understand Vincent left." Specific instructions regarding the succession. Gaddy's mouth curved in something that wasn't quite a smile. Interesting choice, putting such conditions on his own daughter. My father believed in strategy over sentiment, Elena replied coolly. I'm sure you can appreciate that. A ripple of amusement moved through the room. These men had built fortunes on strategy. They understood Vincent's play, even if they didn't like it. The question, Gaddy continued, is whether you understand what you're inheriting. Your father's empire requires particular management. It's not the kind of business that tolerates weakness. I'm not weak. You've been gone for 6 years, another voice interjected. Marcus. Her cousin stood near the windows, dressed in a suit that cost more than it should and fit him like borrowed confidence. You walked away from this family, Elena. From this city. Now you want to come back and claim everything like you never left? Elena met his gaze without blinking. I didn't want any of this, Marcus, but our father made his choice. You're welcome to contest the will in court if you think you have grounds. Courts. Marcus laughed, the sound harsh. You think courts matter here? This isn't New York corporate law, cousin. This is Chicago. Power matters. Loyalty matters. You think these men are going to follow someone who doesn't know the first thing about how the city actually works? I think these men are going to follow the conditions set out in Vincent Ward's will, Elena said steadily. Unless you're suggesting they dishonor his final wishes. Silence fell, dangerous and sharp. Gaddy broke it. No one is dishonoring anything, Miss Ward. But Marcus raises a fair point. You need support, protection. That's why Vincent included the marriage clause. He wanted to ensure you had backing that carries weight in this city. And you've prepared a list of candidates, Elena said, keeping her voice neutral. Men who supposedly have the resources to provide such backing. We have, Gaddy nodded to someone near the door. That's when Elena felt it. The shift in the room's energy. The sudden tension that preceded something significant. The door opened, and Victor Hale walked in. 6 years had changed him the way time changes weapons, sharpened edges that were already lethal. He was taller than Elena remembered, or maybe she'd just tried to make him smaller in her memory. Dark hair touched with gray at the temples. A suit that probably cost more than her hotel room. Eyes the color of winter ice that swept the room once before landing on her. For 3 seconds, the world narrowed to just that gaze. Elena felt everything she'd buried claw its way back to the surface. Humiliation, rage, and underneath it all, the ember of something she'd thought was long dead. Victor's expression didn't change. No surprise, no recognition, nothing but the cold assessment she remembered from that night on the terrace. He nodded to Gaddy. Lorenzo. Victor. Thank you for coming. Gaddy gestured to the table. Please, join us. Victor took a seat with the easy confidence of someone who owned every room he entered. He didn't look at Elena again. Didn't acknowledge her at all. It was somehow worse than cruelty. Marcus was watching them both, something calculating in his eyes. So the great Victor Hale finally shows up. Here to play White Knight, are we? I'm here because I was invited to a business meeting, Victor said, his voice carved from granite. Nothing more. A business meeting about marrying my cousin. Marcus's smile was poisonous. Let's not pretend this is anything other than what it is. Vincent Ward's final manipulation from beyond the grave. Your opinion of your uncle's motivations is noted, Gaddy said dryly. But irrelevant. We're here to discuss the terms of succession. Miss Ward needs to be married within 3 months to someone who can provide legitimate protection and stability. The candidates on the list represent the best options for achieving those goals. Elena found her voice. I'd like to hear from the candidates themselves, what they believe they bring to this arrangement. Another ripple of amusement. These men weren't used to being questioned by women, especially not women they saw as assets to be managed. Gaddy gestured to a man near the end of the table. Senator Morrison, perhaps you'd like to start? Morrison stood, 60, distinguished, with the kind of smile that had won elections and hidden scandals. Miss Ward, I've known your father for 20 years. I have connections in city government, state legislature, federal courts. A marriage between us would provide legal protection and political influence that few others could match. Elena kept her face neutral. And in return? In return, I'd expect a certain cooperation regarding your father's various enterprises, particularly the real estate holdings. There are development opportunities that would benefit from political backing. Translation: he wanted to use her inheritance for his own projects and expected her to be grateful for the privilege. Elena nodded politely. Thank you, Senator. 3 more candidates presented themselves. A banking executive who spoke about financial restructuring, a developer who wanted to expand into Vincent's territories, a lawyer who specialized in making problems disappear. Each one saw her as a means to an end, a door to Vincent Ward's empire that they could walk through if they just said the right words. Elena listened to all of them with the same professional courtesy, making no commitments, revealing nothing. Then Gaddy turned to Victor. Mr. Hale, you've been notably quiet. Victor leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. I'm waiting to hear what Miss Ward actually wants. These men have spent 20 minutes explaining what they expect from a marriage to her. No one's asked what she expects in return. The room went very still. Elena felt something shift in her chest, surprise, maybe, that Victor Hale was the one asking the question everyone else had ignored. Gaddy frowned. The terms are clear, Victor. Protection in exchange for... I'm not asking about terms, Victor interrupted smoothly. I'm asking about goals. Miss Ward, you've built a successful business career in New York. You've been independent for 6 years. Now you're being told you have to marry a stranger to keep an inheritance you didn't ask for. So I'll ask you directly, what do you actually want out of this arrangement? Every eye turned to Elena. She met Victor's gaze across the table, searching for mockery or manipulation, but finding only genuine curiosity. It was disorienting, having him look at her like she mattered, like she was worth listening to. I want control, Elena said finally. Full operational control of my father's empire. I want the freedom to restructure, redirect, or dissolve any part of it I choose. And I want protection that doesn't come with strings that turn me into someone else's puppet. Ambitious, Morrison murmured. Realistic, Elena corrected. If I'm going to tie my life to someone for a year, it's going to be on terms that actually benefit me, not terms that benefit my husband while I smile and play figurehead. Marcus laughed from his position by the window. Good luck finding that in this room, cousin. Every man here sees you as an asset to exploit. You think any of them are going to give you real power? Marcus, Gaddy warned. What? We're all thinking it. Marcus pushed off from the wall, moving closer to the table. Elena's been gone for 6 years. She doesn't know this city anymore, doesn't know how things work. Hell, she doesn't even know why Victor Hale is really sitting at this table. Elena's pulse quickened. Meaning? Marcus's smile turned cruel. Meaning Victor doesn't need your father's empire, cousin. He's already got his own. So ask yourself, why would the most powerful crime boss in Chicago bother showing up to a meeting about marrying Vincent Ward's daughter? What could he possibly want that he doesn't already have? The question hung in the air like a blade. Elena looked at Victor, who was watching Marcus with an expression that could have frozen oceans. That's an excellent question, Victor said quietly. Why don't you share your theory, Marcus, since you seem to have all the answers? Political legitimacy. Marcus's voice dripped satisfaction. Victor Hale runs half this city from the shadows, but shadows are all he's got. He can't touch the legitimate business world, can't make deals in daylight. But marry into the Ward family? Suddenly he's got access to everything he can't buy or threaten his way into. Real estate, banking connections, social standing, all wrapped up in a marriage that makes him look respectable. He turned to Elena. You're not a wife to him, cousin. You're a business acquisition. And when the year is up, he'll drop you just as coldly as he did 6 years ago. The room went dead silent. Elena felt the blood drain from her face. Marcus knew. Somehow her cousin knew about that night, about the rejection that had sent her fleeing Chicago. Victor's expression didn't change, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. You're making assumptions, Marcus. Am I? Marcus's smile widened. Why don't you tell Elena the truth, then? Tell her why you really rejected her 6 years ago. Tell her what her father offered you if you stayed away from his precious daughter. Elena's world tilted. What? Victor stood slowly, the movement controlled and lethal. Careful, Marcus. Why? Afraid she'll learn that Vincent Ward paid you $2 million to break her heart? Marcus turned to Elena, triumph written across his face. Your father thought you were getting too attached to the wrong kind of man, so he made Victor an offer. $2 million to publicly reject you and make sure you never came back. And Victor took the deal. The words hit like bullets. Elena stared at Victor, waiting for denial, for explanation, for anything that would make Marcus's accusation less than true. Victor met her gaze with eyes that held no apology, no regret, just acceptance. Is it true? Elena's voice came out steady, despite the chaos inside her chest. Victor's jaw tightened. It's more complicated than that. Is it true? Silence. Then quietly, yes. The single word shattered something Elena thought she'd already finished breaking 6 years ago. She stood, gathering the remains of her composure like armor. This meeting is over. Elena, Gotti started. I'll make my decision about the marriage within the week, Elena continued, her voice professionally detached. Thank you all for your time. She walked toward the door with steps that didn't shake, even though her entire world was fracturing. Miss Ward, Victor's voice stopped her at the threshold. Elena didn't turn around. Don't. You need to hear. I don't need anything from you. She looked back, meeting his eyes one last time. You made that abundantly clear 6 years ago, and you've just confirmed it again today. Then she walked out, leaving behind the room full of predators and the man who'd been paid to break her heart. The elevator ride down felt like falling. Elena made it to the lobby before her hands started shaking, made it to the car before tears threatened, made it back to her hotel room before the rage hit, white-hot and all-consuming. Her father had paid Victor to reject her, had orchestrated her humiliation like a business deal, had hurt her deliberately, clinically, as part of some larger strategy she couldn't even begin to understand. And Victor had taken the money and done exactly what Vincent Ward paid him to do. Elena stood in the center of her hotel room, surrounded by documents about an empire she didn't want, facing a choice between terrible options, and started to laugh. The sound was broken and bitter, but it was better than crying. Her phone buzzed, a text from Martin. I heard about the meeting. Are you all right? Elena typed back, define all right. Another buzz. We need to discuss your options. Marcus is already moving. He filed a legal challenge to the will this afternoon. Of course he did. Elena sat on the edge of the bed, staring at her phone, feeling the weight of 3 months pressing down like a vice. Marry or lose everything. Choose protection or face Marcus and everyone else who wanted her father's empire. Trust one of the predators who saw her as an asset, or try to survive alone in a city that had already proven it could destroy her. Her phone buzzed again. A different number this time. Unknown. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Miss Ward. Victor Hale's voice filled her ear, controlled and careful. Don't hang up. Elena's grip tightened on the phone. Give me one reason not to. Because Marcus is right about one thing. You need protection. Real protection. And I'm the only one who can provide it. You took money to humiliate me. I took money to keep you alive. Victor's tone didn't change, but something underneath it shifted. Your father didn't pay me to reject you because he was cruel, Elena. He paid me because getting close to you would have made you a target. I was building my organization 6 years ago. I had enemies who would have used you to get to me. Vincent knew that. He was protecting you the only way he knew how. By breaking my heart. By keeping you away from me. Victor paused. It worked. You left Chicago. Built a life somewhere safe. Became someone who doesn't need my world. Then why are you calling? Because you're back in my world now, whether you want to be or not. And Marcus was also right about what happens if you try to survive this alone. You'll be dead within a month. Elena closed her eyes. So your solution is what? I marry you? Trust the man who was paid to hurt me? My solution is you make a strategic decision based on reality instead of emotion. Victor's voice was granite. I don't need your father's empire. I don't need legitimacy. What I need is stability in this city, and right now the Ward succession is creating chaos. Marcus is making alliances with people I can't control. If he takes over, it starts a war. So I'm a chess piece. You're a partner in preventing bloodshed. Victor's tone softened slightly. 1 year, Elena. A marriage contract with clear terms. You get full control of your inheritance and protection that actually means something. I get political stability and an end to Marcus's power play. When the year ends, we dissolve the marriage and go our separate ways. And I'm supposed to trust you. No, Victor said quietly. You're supposed to make the smart choice. Trust has nothing to do with it. Elena opened her eyes, staring at the Chicago skyline through her window. The city looked beautiful from a distance, glittering and full of promise. But she knew better now. I need to think about it, she said finally. You have until Marcus makes his next move, Victor replied, which, based on the legal challenge he filed this afternoon, gives you about 48 hours before things get significantly worse. 48 hours, Elena repeated. Call me when you decide. Victor paused. For what it's worth, I am sorry. About 6 years ago. About how it happened. But I'm not sorry you stayed safe. He hung up before she could respond. Elena sat in the silence of her hotel room, holding a phone that felt like a weapon, facing a choice that felt like surrender. Marry Victor Hale, the man who'd destroyed her once already, or face Marcus and the wolves alone. Neither option felt like survival, but one of them might let her keep breathing long enough to find a third choice. Elena pulled up her contacts, found Martin's number and typed, "Set up a private meeting with Victor Hale tomorrow morning, just the two of us. I want to hear his terms." The response came seconds later. I'll arrange it. Elena set down her phone and walked to the window, pressing her palm against the cold glass. Chicago stared back at her, indifferent and dangerous. 6 years ago, she'd run from this city and the man who'd broken her heart. Now she was about to walk back into both, eyes open, knowing exactly what they could do to her. The only question was whether she was strong enough to survive it this time. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on as darkness fell. Elena watched them burn and thought about fire, about how sometimes the only way to survive was to become the thing you feared most. Dangerous, untouchable, willing to make deals with devils if it meant staying alive. She'd spent 6 years becoming someone Vincent Ward could never control. Now she'd spend the next year proving she couldn't be controlled by anyone. Not Marcus, not the associates, and certainly not Victor Hale, even if she had to marry him to do it. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the first solid ground she'd found since landing in Chicago. Elena turned from the window, pulled out her laptop, and started reading every document Martin had given her about Victor Hale's organization. If she was going to negotiate with the devil, she needed to know exactly what he was capable of, and more importantly, what he had to lose. The meeting location Victor chose wasn't what Elena expected. Not his office, not some neutral conference room. Instead, she found herself being escorted by a silent driver through Chicago's warehouse district at 7 in the morning, pulling up to what looked like an abandoned industrial building with broken windows and graffiti-tagged walls. Elena's hand moved to her phone, every instinct screaming that this was a setup. The driver caught her movement in the rearview mirror. "Mr. Hale is waiting on the roof, Miss Ward. There's an elevator inside that still works." "The roof? He said you'd appreciate the privacy." Elena weighed her options. She'd told Martin where she was going, had sent him the address. If she disappeared, at least someone would know where to start looking. That thought was only marginally comforting. She stepped out of the car into the cold morning air. The building loomed above her, all rust and decay, looking like the kind of place where bad decisions went to become cautionary tales. The door opened before she could knock. A woman stood in the threshold, late 30s, athletic build, with eyes that cataloged threats the way other people cataloged grocery lists. "Miss Ward, this way." The interior was cleaner than the exterior suggested. The first floor had been gutted down to concrete and steel beams, but everything was swept clean, almost maintained. The elevator at the far end looked industrial and dangerous, but when the woman pressed the call button, it arrived with surprising speed. They rode up in silence. Elena counted floors, 6 of them, before the elevator shuddered to a stop and the doors opened onto the Chicago skyline. The roof had been transformed. Where she'd expected more decay, she found a carefully maintained space with a small glass structure in the center, half greenhouse, half observation deck. Through the transparent walls, she could see Victor standing with his back to the elevator, looking out over the city as dawn broke across the lake. The woman who'd escorted her nodded once and disappeared back into the elevator, leaving Elena alone with the man she'd spent all night researching. Victor Hale's file read like a masterclass in building power from nothing. Orphaned at 15. survived Chicago's worst neighborhoods through intelligence and ruthlessness. By 25, he controlled enough of the city's underground economy that the major crime families had to acknowledge him. By 30, he'd consolidated power so completely that even the legitimate business world couldn't ignore his influence. He'd done it all without the advantage of family legacy or inherited wealth, just pure strategic brilliance and a reputation for keeping his word, both his promises and his threats. The file also confirmed what Marcus had said. Victor operated in shadows. His legitimate businesses were minimal, carefully constructed shells that gave him plausible deniability, but no real standing in Chicago's above-ground power structures. Marrying into the Ward family would change that. Elena crossed the roof, her heels clicking on the concrete. Interesting choice of location. Victor turned. In the early morning light, he looked different than he had in the conference room. Less controlled, maybe, or just more honest about what he was. "I own the building," he said. "Bought it 5 years ago. Most people see an abandoned warehouse. I see potential." "For what?" "Development, affordable housing, mixed-use space, community resources." Victor's mouth curved slightly. "Not all my business is criminal, Elena. Just most of it. Just the parts that keep me alive." He gestured to the glass structure. "Inside. I had coffee brought up. We should talk before the city wakes up completely." Elena followed him into what turned out to be a surprisingly comfortable space. Modern furniture that didn't match the industrial aesthetic, floor-to-ceiling windows that turned Chicago into a panorama. And yes, fresh coffee in a carafe that probably cost more than the building's exterior suggested. Victor poured 2 cups without asking, handed her one, and sat across from her in a leather chair that had seen better days, but somehow fit him perfectly. "You read the file Martin gave you on me," he said. It wasn't a question. "I read everything I could find on you." Elena sipped her coffee, including the parts that aren't in official files. "And?" "And you're either the smartest criminal in Chicago or the most dangerous legitimate businessman, depending on who's telling the story." She met his eyes over the rim of her cup. "What you're not is someone who does anything without calculating the return on investment." "True. So tell me what marrying me is actually worth to you. And don't insult my intelligence by pretending it's just about stability." Victor leaned back, studying her with that same intensity she remembered from 6 years ago. When he'd looked at her like she was a puzzle he wanted to solve but couldn't afford to touch. "You've changed," he said finally. 6 years ago, you would have led with emotion. Demanded to know why I took your father's money. Wanted explanations for the hurt. 6 years ago, I was naive enough to think explanations mattered. Elena set down her cup. Now I know that people do what serves their interests. The reasons are just decoration, so let's skip the decoration and get to the terms. Something flickered across Victor's expression. Approval, maybe, or regret. "The Ward family has political connections I can't buy," he said. "Your father spent 30 years cultivating relationships with aldermen, judges, state representatives. Those relationships transfer with the estate. If you marry me, I gain access to legitimate channels of influence. It makes the next phase of my business expansion considerably easier." "What expansion?" "I'm moving my operations into the light," Victor said simply. "Everything I've built in the underground economy, I'm translating into legitimate business. Real estate development, import companies with actual legal products, financial services that don't require creative accounting. But to do that, I need credibility. The Ward name provides that." Elena processed this. "You're trying to go straight." "I'm trying to evolve." Victor's tone was matter-of-fact. "The criminal empire I built has a shelf life. Eventually, either law enforcement gets smarter or my competitors get bolder. I'd rather transition to something sustainable before that happens." "And you think marrying me gives you that transition?" "I think marrying you gives me a foundation to build on. The Ward family's reputation isn't spotless, but it's established. Your father was brutal, but he was also respected in certain circles. That respect transfers. Until our year is up and we divorce. By then, I'll have established my own legitimacy. The marriage just opens doors. What I do once I'm through them is my concern." Victor paused. "What about you, Elena? What do you actually want from this arrangement?" "I told you yesterday. Control of my father's empire and protection from Marcus." "That's what you said in front of the associates." Victor's eyes narrowed. I'm asking what you actually want, not what sounds strategic in a conference room. Elena stood, walking to the windows, needing the city skyline to focus on instead of Victor's too perceptive gaze. What did she want? The honest answer was more complicated than control or protection. She wanted vindication for the girl who'd been publicly humiliated. She wanted to prove that Vincent Ward's attempt to manipulate her life had failed. She wanted to show Chicago that she wasn't the weak, heartbroken thing that had fled 6 years ago. She wanted to look Victor Hale in the eye as an equal and make him regret ever taking her father's money. But saying any of that out loud felt too raw, too vulnerable. I want to dismantle my father's empire, Elena said instead. The criminal parts, at least. The human trafficking fronts he disguised as massage parlors. The money laundering through the restaurants. The protection rackets targeting immigrant communities. I want to burn it all down and rebuild something that doesn't survive on exploitation. Silence filled the space behind her. Elena turned to find Victor watching her with an expression she couldn't read. That's ambitious, he said finally. Also dangerous. The people who profit from those operations won't let you shut them down without a fight. I know. And you think marrying me gives you the protection to do it anyway. I think marrying you gives me enough breathing room to start. Elena crossed her arms. Unless you have a problem with me destroying parts of the empire you're supposedly marrying me to access. Victor stood, moving to join her at the windows. He was close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and understated that probably costs more than most people's monthly rent. I don't profit from human trafficking or exploitation, he said quietly. Those were your father's ventures, not mine. If you want to burn them down, I won't stop you. How magnanimous. It's practical. Those operations create risk without enough profit to justify them. Your father ran them because he enjoyed the power. I have no interest in that kind of power. Victor looked out at the city. If we do this, Elena, we do it as actual partners. You get access to my resources and protection. I get access to your family's political connections. We both work toward our respective goals without sabotaging each other. For 1 year. For 1 year, Victor agreed. After that, we dissolve the marriage cleanly. No drama, no complications. You keep your empire, I keep mine, and we go back to being strangers. Elena studied his profile, looking for deception and finding only brutal honesty. Why did you really take my father's money? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Victor turned to face her. I told you, you were getting too close. If we'd continued, you would have become a target. That's the strategic answer. I want the real one. Victor's jaw tightened. You want me to say I regretted it? That hurting you kept me up at night? I want you to tell me the truth. The truth is that 6 years ago I was building an organization from violence and fear. I had enemies who would have killed you just to send me a message. Your father understood that better than you did. He offered me money to break things off cleanly. I took it because it was the smart play. Victor's voice dropped. But if you're asking if I felt something for you before that night on the terrace, the answer is yes. And if you're asking if destroying it bothered me, the answer is also yes. I'm not a good man, Elena, but I'm not enough of a monster to enjoy hurting you. The admission landed between them, heavy and complicated. Elena searched his face for the lie, for the manipulation, but found only exhaustion, the kind that came from carrying too many secrets for too long. I don't forgive you, she said. I don't expect you to. And I don't trust you. Smart. Victor stepped back, creating distance. But you do need me, and I need this marriage to work. So whatever feelings complicate this, we put them aside and focus on the arrangement. 1 year, clear terms, mutual benefit. Elena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that you couldn't just put aside 6 years of hurt and humiliation like it was a balance sheet to be managed. But he was right about the reality of her situation. Marcus had filed a legal challenge. The associates were circling, and she had less than 3 months to either marry someone or lose everything. Victor was offering her exactly what she'd asked for yesterday: control, protection, and freedom to pursue her own goals. The fact that it came wrapped in complicated history didn't change the strategic value. I want the terms in writing, Elena said. Every detail. What you get access to, what I maintain control over, how we handle the dissolution after a year. Agreed. My lawyers can have a contract drafted by tomorrow. I want my own lawyers to review it. Encouraged, Victor pulled out his phone. Give me Martin's information. We'll coordinate. Elena rattled off Martin's contact details, watching Victor type them in with efficient precision. One more thing, she added. If we do this, I need total transparency about your operations. I can't protect myself from threats I don't know about. That means you tell me everything. Who your enemies are, what risks you're managing, what moves you're making that might impact me. Victor's expression turned cautious. That's a lot of trust to ask from someone who just said she doesn't trust me. It's not trust, it's information management. Elena held his gaze. If I'm going to be your wife, even strategically, I need to know what I'm walking into. Non-negotiable. Victor considered this for a long moment, then nodded. Transparency goes both ways. You tell me about your plans for the Ward Empire. What you're dismantling, what you're keeping, who you're going to piss off in the process. Deal. They stood there, two people negotiating a marriage like a corporate merger, and Elena felt the surreal weight of it settle over her shoulders. This was really happening. She was going to marry Victor Hale. The thought should have felt like surrender. Instead, it felt like drawing a line in sand and daring the world to cross it. Victor's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his expression shifted into something harder. We have a problem. What kind of problem? Marcus just called an emergency meeting of the family associates. This afternoon, he's going to push for an immediate vote to overturn your father's will on grounds of mental incompetence. Elena's blood went cold. He can't do that. He can try, and if he gets enough votes, the will goes into probate litigation. That could tie up the estate for years. Victor was already typing. How fast can you get your lawyers mobilized? Fast. But Victor, if this goes to a vote, I don't have the relationships to win it. The associates barely know me. Then we change the narrative. Victor looked up, his eyes sharp with calculation. We announce our engagement. Today, before Marcus can frame you as incapable of managing the succession. Elena's heart kicked against her ribs. We don't even have a contract yet. We have an agreement in principle. That's enough. Victor moved toward the elevator. The associates need to see that you're not some lost daughter floundering in her father's empire. They need to see that you're strategic enough to secure the strongest alliance in Chicago. Marrying me sends that message. It also makes us targets. We're already targets. This way, we're targets with a unified front. Victor pressed the elevator call button. Trust me, Elena. Marcus is expecting you to be alone and vulnerable at that meeting. We show up together, engaged, and it pulls the ground out from under his entire strategy. Elena's mind raced through scenarios, trying to find the flaw in Victor's logic. But he was right. An engagement announcement would demonstrate strength, strategy, and exactly the kind of ruthless practicality the associates would respect. It would also burn her last bridge back to a normal life. But then, those bridges had been burning since the moment she'd landed in Chicago. Okay, Elena said. We announced the engagement at the meeting. But Victor, if we do this, there's no going back. The associates will expect a wedding within weeks, not months. Then we give them a wedding. Victor's expression was unreadable. Whatever timeline works for the optics. The elevator arrived. They rode down in tense silence, Elena's thoughts spiraling through everything that was about to change. When they reached the ground floor, Victor's driver was waiting with a different car, something bulletproof and discreet. I'll have my team coordinate with yours on the announcement strategy, Victor said. The meeting is at 3. We should arrive together. Elena nodded, then paused at the car door. Victor, one more thing. When we announce this, people are going to ask questions. About us. About why we're getting married. We tell them the truth. It's a strategic alliance between two powerful families. And 6 years ago? Victor's expression flickered. 6 years ago was the past. This is business. Anyone who asks gets the same answer. Even though they'll know there's more to the story. Let them speculate. Victor opened the car door for her. Mystery often works better than explanation. Elena slid into the back seat, and Victor closed the door between them with quiet finality. As the car pulled away, Elena watched him through the tinted window, standing in front of his abandoned warehouse like a king surveying a forgotten kingdom. She pulled out her phone and called Martin. He answered on the first ring. Elena, I heard about Marcus's meeting. We're making an engagement announcement today, Victor and I. Elena forced the words out steady. I need you to coordinate with his legal team on a marriage contract. Fast. Silence. Then carefully, are you sure about this? No, but it's the best option I have. Elena, marrying Victor Hale is exactly what my father wanted me to do, Elena interrupted, which should tell you how desperate the situation is. I need this done, Martin, whatever it takes. Another pause. I'll handle it, but Elena, please be careful. Victor Hale is not a man who does anything halfway. If you marry him, even strategically, you're tying yourself to someone very dangerous. I know exactly how dangerous he is. Elena leaned her head against the car window. That's why I'm doing this. She hung up and closed her eyes, feeling the city rush past outside. By sunset, she would be engaged to the man who'd once destroyed her. By next month, she'd be married to him. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, Elena felt something that was almost like relief. At least now she knew what battlefield she was fighting on. The afternoon arrived too quickly. Elena dressed in armor again. This time, a black suit by Alexander McQueen that made her look like she could negotiate treaties or declare war with equal efficiency. She wore her mother's diamond earrings, the only inheritance she'd gotten before the woman had died when Elena was 12. They felt like a talisman against whatever was coming. Victor's car picked her up at 2:30. He was already inside, dressed in dark charcoal, looking like money and menace in equal measure. Ready? He asked. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice. Victor handed her a small jewelry box. But if you're doing this, do it all the way. Elena opened the box to find a ring, platinum band with a single perfect diamond that caught the light and threw it back in sharp fragments. It was stunning, elegant, exactly the kind of ring that would make a statement. Elena stared at it, something twisting in her chest. It was my mother's, Victor said quietly. One of the only things she left me. I want you to wear it for the announcement. Victor, I can't. It's strategic, he interrupted. The associates will look at your hand. They need to see something real, something that says this engagement isn't just political theater. Elena carefully lifted the ring from the box. It fit perfectly, which shouldn't have surprised her. Victor was thorough about details. After the year is up, I'll give it back, she said. Victor's expression was unreadable. We'll see. The car delivered them to the same building as yesterday's meeting, but this time the energy was different, tenser, more predatory. Marcus had called in every favor and ally he had. The conference room was packed with faces Elena didn't recognize, associates who'd come to watch Vincent Ward's empire get carved up by competing interests. They went silent when Elena and Victor walked in together. Marcus stood at the head of the table, mid-sentence, and stopped cold. His eyes tracked from Elena's face to her hand, landing on the ring. His expression went through several stages: shock, fury, calculation, before settling on forced calm. Cousin, he said with poisonous sweetness, how kind of you to join us. And you've brought company. Not company. Elena took her seat, Victor beside her, their proximity making a statement. My fiancé. The room erupted. Voices overlapped. Questions, accusations, demands for explanation. Gotti banged his hand on the table for order, but it took several minutes for the chaos to subside. Explain, Gotti said finally, his eyes sharp on Elena. It's simple. Elena kept her voice level. Victor and I are engaged. We'll be married within the month. This satisfies the terms of my father's will and resolves any questions about the succession. Convenient timing, Marcus said coldly. Yesterday you walked out of here. Today you show up engaged to the most powerful criminal in Chicago. You expect us to believe this is anything other than a desperate power grab? I expect you to recognize strategic planning when you see it. Elena met her cousin's glare without flinching. You called this meeting to challenge my competence to manage the Ward estate. I'm demonstrating competence by securing exactly the kind of alliance my father wanted. Your father wanted you protected, not owned by Victor Hale. I'm not owned by anyone. Elena's voice could have cut glass. This is a partnership, one that benefits both families and ensures stability during the transition. Senator Morrison leaned forward. Miss Ward, forgive my bluntness, but this seems rushed. You've been back in Chicago for less than 48 hours. How can you possibly know that marriage to Mr. Hale is the right choice? Because I'm not choosing based on emotion, Senator. I'm choosing based on strategic necessity. Elena gestured to the room. Every person here knows that the Ward estate is vulnerable right now. My father's death created a power vacuum. Marcus wants to fill it. Others in this room have their own ambitions. If I want to maintain control, I need protection that Marcus can't circumvent or buy off. Victor provides that. At what cost? Marcus demanded. What did you promise him, Elena? Access to our political connections? Control over father's legitimate businesses? Or did you just sell the whole empire to him in exchange for a wedding ring? Careful, Marcus. Victor's voice was quiet but lethal. You're making accusations you can't prove. I don't need proof. Everyone in this room knows you don't do anything without extracting maximum value. So what did you extract from my cousin? A partnership that keeps Chicago stable. Victor leaned back in his chair, projecting calm authority. Your uncle's death threatened to destabilize several ongoing arrangements. Elena's inheritance created questions about continuity. Our marriage resolves those questions and ensures that the Ward Empire continues to function without interruption. While you gain access to everything my father built. While I gain a wife who's intelligent enough to see past family drama to strategic reality. Victor's eyes stayed on Marcus. Something you apparently can't do. The tension in the room ratcheted higher. Gaddy intervened before it could explode into something worse. Regardless of anyone's opinions on the matter, Miss Ward is correct. This engagement satisfies the terms of Vincent's will. If she and Victor marry within the required time frame, the estate transfers to her control. She's not capable of managing it, Marcus insisted. She's been gone for 6 years. She doesn't understand how Chicago works anymore. Then it's fortunate she's marrying someone who does. Elena's smile was sharp. Or did you think you were the only one capable of making strategic alliances, Marcus? You've spent 3 years building your own network, making your own deals. I've simply accelerated the process. Marcus's face flushed with rage. This is a mistake. You're making a mistake. Perhaps, but it's my mistake to make. Elena stood, Victor rising beside her with predatory grace. The engagement is official. The wedding will happen before the deadline. If anyone wants to challenge my competence to inherit, you're welcome to take it up with my lawyers. And Victor's. She turned to leave, but Marcus's voice stopped her. This won't protect you, Elena. Victor can't be everywhere. And once you've served your purpose to him, you'll be just as disposable as you were 6 years ago. Elena looked back at her cousin, at the fury and desperation in his eyes, and realized something important. Marcus wasn't just angry about losing the inheritance. He was terrified, because he'd built his entire identity on eventually taking over Vincent Ward's empire, and Elena's return had shattered that certainty. You're wrong about one thing, Marcus, Elena said quietly. I'm not disposable. Not anymore. 6 years ago, I let this city break me. I won't make that mistake again. She walked out with Victor at her side, leaving behind a room full of predators who were just beginning to realize she might be more dangerous than she looked. The car was waiting. They climbed inside and the door closed on the chaos they'd created. Victor was silent for several blocks. Then, you handled that well. I didn't have much choice. You had plenty of choices. You made the right ones. He glanced at the ring on her finger. Marcus is going to escalate. You know that. I know. He'll come after you, try to prove you're unfit or incapable or in over your head. Let him try. Elena turned to look at Victor directly. I meant what I said in there. I'm not the person who left Chicago 6 years ago. Marcus is going to learn that the hard way. Something flickered in Victor's expression, approval mixed with something that might have been concern. There's something you should know, he said after a moment. About what happens next. Tell me. The engagement announcement will make waves, but the people who really matter won't be convinced until they see us together, as a unit. That means public appearances, events, showing Chicago that this marriage is real. Elena's stomach tightened. You mean acting like we're actually a couple? I mean convincing everyone that we are actually a couple, at least in public. Victor's tone was matter of fact. We don't have to pretend in private, but when there are eyes on us, we need to sell this. How do you suggest we do that? There's a charity gala tomorrow night, major fundraiser for children's hospitals. Every important person in Chicago will be there. We should attend, together. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. 6 years ago, She'd been humiliated at a charity gala. Now Victor was suggesting they return to the exact same kind of event as an engaged couple. Fine, she said. We'll go. But Victor, I need something from you in return. Name it. Tell me about your enemies, the real ones, the people who might come after me because of this engagement. Victor's expression went carefully neutral. That's a long list. Then start with the dangerous ones. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, but not here. Not in a car where the driver can hear every word. Come to my place tonight. We'll go through everything. Your place? It's secure. And if we're going to convince Chicago we're a real couple, you should probably know where I actually live. Victor's mouth curved slightly. Unless you'd prefer to keep meeting in abandoned warehouses. Elena found herself almost smiling. Your place is fine. What time? 8. I'll send a car. They rode the rest of the way in silence, each lost in thoughts about the performance they were about to give and the very real dangers hiding behind it. When the car stopped in front of Elena's hotel, Victor caught her hand before she could exit. Elena. She turned back. What you said in the meeting about not being disposable, Victor said quietly. You're right. You're not. Not to me. Before she could respond, he released her hand and nodded to the driver. Elena stepped out onto the sidewalk, her thoughts tangled with confusion and something that felt dangerously close to hope. She looked down at the ring on her finger, Victor's mother's ring, catching the afternoon light. In less than 24 hours, she'd gone from grieving daughter to engaged woman. And tonight she'd walk into Victor Hale's private world and learn exactly what she'd agreed to protect herself from. The question was whether the protection would be worth the price. Elena pulled out her phone and texted Martin. Engagement announced. Marcus is furious. What's our next move? The response came quickly. Survival. Marcus filed 3 more legal challenges in the last hour. He's not going to accept this quietly. Elena stared at the message, then typed back, Good. Let him waste his energy on lawsuits. I've got other plans. She pocketed her phone and walked into the hotel, her mind already working through the next 10 moves in a game that was just beginning. Marcus wanted a war? Fine. Elena Ward was ready to give him one. Victor's driver arrived at exactly 8, and this time the destination wasn't a warehouse or a conference room. The car wound through the Gold Coast, Chicago's most exclusive neighborhood where old money lived behind limestone facades and private security systems that cost more than most homes. They stopped in front of a building Elena recognized, the Astor Residences, a pre-war tower that housed some of the city's wealthiest families. She'd been here once as a teenager, attending some charity function with her father. She remembered marble lobbies and the kind of quiet that only serious wealth could buy. The driver opened her door. Penthouse level, Miss Ward. Security will escort you up. Elena stepped into a lobby that gleamed with Art Deco elegance, brass fixtures, marble floors, a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a museum. A security guard in an understated suit was already waiting. Miss Ward, this way, please. They took a private elevator that required a key card to access. As they ascended, Elena tried to reconcile what she knew about Victor with this address. He'd built his empire in shadows and violence, but apparently he lived surrounded by the trappings of legitimate wealth. The elevator opened directly into Victor's penthouse. Elena stepped into a space that was nothing like she'd expected. Where she'd imagined cold minimalism or aggressive displays of wealth, she found something almost comfortable. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the lake, turning water and sky into living art. The furniture was modern, but warm, leather and dark wood, pieces that looked chosen for function as much as aesthetics. Bookshelves lined one wall, packed with volumes that showed actual wear. Victor stood near the windows, 2 glasses of wine already poured on the table beside him. You look surprised, he said. I am. Elena moved into the room, her eyes cataloging details. This isn't what I expected from Chicago's most feared crime boss. What did you expect? Weapons on the walls and a throne made of money? Something like that. Victor's mouth curved. I save the dramatic displays for people I need to intimidate. Here, I just live. He handed her a glass of wine, something red and probably expensive. Elena accepted it, noting that Victor had remembered she preferred red to white. A small detail, but it suggested he'd been paying attention 6 years ago, even before everything fell apart. You said you'd tell me about your enemies, Elena said, choosing directness over small talk. I did. Victor gestured to a leather sofa. Sit. This might take a while. Elena sat, and Victor settled across from her, close enough for conversation but maintaining careful distance. The short version is that anyone who's powerful in Chicago has enemies, Victor began. I have more than most because I built my organization by disrupting the existing power structures. That made me a lot of people's problem. Be specific. Who wants you dead? The Marconi family has wanted me dead for 5 years. I took over territories they considered theirs. They've tried twice to kill me. Both times failed, but they're persistent. Elena's grip tightened on her wine glass. And now that we're engaged, I'm a target too. You were already a target the moment you inherited your father's estate. The Marconis had business arrangements with Vincent. With him gone, they'll want to renegotiate, through force if necessary. Victor's expression was grim. Our engagement just makes you a more valuable target. They might try to use you to get leverage over me. Comforting. I'm being honest. You wanted transparency. Victor took a sip of his wine. Then there's the Kozlov organization, Russian mob, operates mostly in the northern suburbs. They've been trying to expand into the city for years. I've blocked them every time. They see me as an obstacle. Anyone else? Several smaller groups who think killing me would create an opportunity. A few corrupt politicians who'd prefer I disappear because I know too much about their side businesses. And Marcus. Elena's head snapped up. Marcus is working with your enemies? Marcus is working with anyone who'll help him take the Ward estate. That includes people who'd be happy to see both of us dead. Victor set down his glass. He met with a Marconi representative yesterday. We don't know what was discussed, but the timing is suspicious. How do you know this? I have people everywhere, Elena. Eyes, ears, informants who tell me things other people think are secret. Victor's tone was matter-of-fact. It's how I've stayed alive this long. Elena processed this, her mind racing through implications. Marcus wasn't just fighting her in court. He was making alliances with Victor's enemies, which meant the danger was worse than she'd thought. What's our security plan? She asked. Starting tomorrow, you'll have protection. 2 bodyguards, minimum. They'll be discreet but constant. You won't go anywhere without them. I'm not used to having shadows. You'll get used to it. The alternative is being vulnerable to people who specialize in making problems disappear. Victor leaned forward, his expression intense. Elena, I need you to understand something. This engagement made you safer in some ways and more dangerous in others. The associates will think twice before moving against you because you're under my protection. But my actual enemies will see you as leverage. The next few weeks are going to be the most dangerous. Until the wedding. Until the wedding, Victor agreed. Once we're married, attacking you becomes a direct attack on me. That raises the stakes considerably. Most groups won't risk open war, but until then, you're in what we call the transition period. Fair game. Elena felt ice settle in her stomach. How long until the wedding? I think 3 weeks is optimal. Long enough to look legitimate, short enough to minimize the window of vulnerability. 3 weeks. Elena laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. I'm getting married in 3 weeks to a man I barely know to protect myself from crime families and my own cousin. This is insane. Yes, Victor said simply, but it's also survival. And you strike me as someone who's very good at surviving. Elena met his eyes, searching for manipulation or strategy, but finding only honest assessment. Victor thought she was strong enough to handle this. The realization was oddly steadying. Tell me about the charity gala tomorrow, she said, changing subjects before the weight of everything crushed her. What should I expect? Expect every major power player in Chicago to be watching us, judging whether our engagement is real or performance. They'll be looking for cracks, inconsistencies, any sign that this is just strategic theater. So we give them a performance. We give them a relationship. Victor's tone shifted, becoming almost gentle. Elena, I know this is complicated. I know you have every reason to hate me. But if we're going to convince Chicago that we're a real couple, we need to at least appear comfortable with each other. That means physical proximity, Elena finished. I understand. You can touch me in public, hold my hand, put your arm around me, whatever sells the illusion. It's not just about touching. It's about how we look at each other, how we stand together. The small moments that make people believe there's something real between us. Elena's pulse quickened. And in private? In private, we're business partners negotiating a complex arrangement. Nothing more. Victor's expression was carefully neutral. Unless you want something different. The question hung between them, dangerous and tempting. Elena thought about 6 years of anger, about the girl who'd been rejected on a terrace, about every reason she should keep Victor at a distance. Then she thought about the ring on her finger and the very real threat circling them both. Business partners is fine, she said finally. Let's keep things simple. Something flickered across Victor's face, relief or disappointment, she couldn't tell. Simple, he agreed. Speaking of which, there's something else we need to discuss. Living arrangements. Elena's eyebrows rose. You think I should move in here? I think that after the wedding, people will expect us to live together, and this penthouse is considerably more secure than your hotel. Victor gestured to the windows. Bulletproof glass, private elevator access, security systems that would make a government facility jealous. If someone wants to get to you here, they'll have to go through multiple layers of protection. And if I want privacy? This place is 4,000 square feet. Plenty of room for both of us to have space. Victor stood, moving toward a hallway. Come on, I'll show you. Elena followed him through the penthouse, noting details she'd missed on first glance. The kitchen was state-of-the-art but looked actually used, coffee rings on the counter, a bookmarked cookbook near the stove. The hallway was lined with photographs, mostly black and white shots of Chicago architecture. Victor stopped at a door near the end of the hall. This would be yours. He opened it to reveal a bedroom suite that was bigger than Elena's entire New York apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows, a king bed with hotel-quality linens, a bathroom that belonged in a luxury spa. Through another door, she glimpsed a walk-in closet the size of a small boutique. It has its own entrance to the main living area, Victor explained, and a lock on the door if you want privacy. I'm at the other end of the hall. We'd share common spaces but maintain separate bedrooms. Elena walked into the room, running her hand along the window frame. The view was spectacular. Lake Michigan stretching dark and infinite, the city lights reflecting off the water like scattered diamonds. This is a lot to process, she said quietly. I know. Victor stayed in the doorway, giving her space. But Elena, if we're doing this, we should do it properly. Half measures won't protect you. Moving in here after the wedding, presenting a unified front, showing Chicago that this marriage is real, that's what keeps you alive. And what do you get out of it, besides political connections? Victor was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was lower, more honest than she'd heard it. 6 years ago, I pushed you away because caring about you made you vulnerable. I've spent those years building an empire that's supposed to make me untouchable. But the truth is, power doesn't fix loneliness. It just makes it more expensive. He paused. I'm not asking for a real marriage, Elena, but I won't pretend that having you in my life again is purely strategic, even if that's all it can be. The admission hit Elena like a physical blow. For 6 years, she'd imagined Victor as cold, calculating, incapable of real emotion. Hearing him confess to loneliness shattered that image completely. Don't, she said, her voice rough. Don't make this more complicated than it is. I'm not trying to complicate anything. I'm just being honest. Victor stepped back into the hallway. Think about the living arrangements. You don't have to decide tonight. But after the gala tomorrow, people will start asking questions about where you're staying. He started to leave, then paused. The guest room is made up if you want to stay tonight. Get a feel for the place. No pressure either way. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in a bedroom that might become hers, in a penthouse that might become home, with thoughts that were far too tangled to sort through. She pulled out her phone and texted Martin, "Need the marriage contract reviewed ASAP. Also need background on the Marconi family and Kozlov organization. Everything you can find." The response came quickly. Already compiling the information. Elena, please be careful. The more I dig into Victor's world, the more dangerous it looks. Elena typed back, I know, but I'm in it now. Might as well understand what I'm dealing with. She pocketed her phone and walked to the windows, pressing her palm against the bulletproof glass. Tomorrow night, she'd walk into a room full of Chicago's elite on Victor Hale's arm. She'd smile and play the part of the happy fiancé while enemies watched for weakness and Marcus plotted her downfall. And she'd do it all while pretending her heart wasn't breaking and remaking itself into something harder. Elena stayed the night. She told herself it was practical. Why waste time going back to the hotel when the guest room was perfectly comfortable? But the truth was more complicated. She wanted to understand the space she might be living in. Wanted to see what Victor's life looked like when he wasn't performing power for an audience. She woke to the smell of coffee and found Victor in the kitchen, already dressed for the day, reading something on his tablet. "There's breakfast," he said without looking up. "Mrs. Chen comes in 3 mornings a week. She left pastries and fruit." Elena poured coffee, noting the way Victor seemed completely natural in this domestic setting. It was oddly disarming. "What are you reading?" she asked. "News coverage of our engagement." Victor turned the tablet to show her. It made the society pages in 3 major papers. "The consensus seems to be that we're either brilliantly strategic or completely insane." Elena scanned the articles. Most treated the engagement as a business merger with romantic window dressing. A few speculated about the speed of it all. One particularly nasty gossip column questioned whether Elena was pregnant. "Charming," she muttered. "Welcome to life under public scrutiny." Victor took the tablet back. "It's going to get worse before it gets better, especially after the gala tonight." "What time do we need to leave?" "Event starts at 7. I'll have hair and makeup sent over at 4 if you want." Elena blinked. "You have people for that?" "I have people for everything." Victor's mouth quirked. "You're marrying into considerable resources, Elena. Might as well use them." "I can do my own hair and makeup." "I know you can, but tonight needs to be perfect. Let the professionals help." He stood, carrying his coffee cup to the sink. "I have meetings until 5. Security will be here at 3 to go over protocols with you, and your bodyguards will introduce themselves around 2. "This is really happening," Elena said, more to herself than Victor. "Yes." He paused at the doorway. "Are you ready?" Elena thought about Marcus's fury, about the Marconi family and Russian mobsters, about walking into a ballroom as Victor Hale's fiancée. "No," she admitted. "But I'll do it anyway." Victor's expression softened slightly. "That's all any of us can do." Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in a kitchen that smelled like expensive coffee and the future she'd somehow agreed to. The bodyguards arrived at exactly 2. A woman named Sarah, who moved like a dancer and had eyes that missed nothing, and a man named James who looked like he bench-pressed trucks for fun. They were professional, courteous, and made it clear that Elena's safety was now their primary concern. By 4, when the glam team arrived, Elena felt like she was preparing for battle rather than a party. The dress Victor had sent over was stunning, a floor-length gown in deep emerald that managed to be both elegant and subtly dangerous. It fit perfectly, which meant Victor had somehow gotten her measurements without asking. The makeup artist worked magic, creating a look that was dramatic without being overdone. The hairstylist swept Elena's dark hair into an updo that was effortlessly sophisticated. When she looked at herself in the mirror, Elena barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked powerful, untouchable. Exactly the kind of woman who could stand beside Victor Hale and belong there. Victor knocked on her door at 6:30. When she opened it, his expression did something complicated: surprise, appreciation, and something darker that made Elena's pulse quicken. "You look incredible," he said quietly. "So do you." It was true. Victor in a tuxedo was a weapon of mass destruction, all sharp lines and controlled power. The formal wear somehow made him look more dangerous, not less. He held out his arm. "Ready to face Chicago?" Elena slipped her hand into the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid warmth of him through the expensive fabric. "Let's give them something to talk about," she said. The drive to the gala was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. But when the car pulled up to the venue, the Chicago Cultural Center, all marble and gold and Tiffany glass, Victor caught Elena's hand. "Whatever happens in there, we're a united front," he said. "You feel uncomfortable, squeeze my hand twice. You want to leave? Say you need air. I'll follow your lead." The care in his voice surprised her. "Thank you. We're partners now, Elena. That means I've got your back." His grip tightened briefly. "Even when this is over and we go our separate ways, I'll never stop protecting you. I want you to know that." Before Elena could respond, the car door opened, and they stepped into the lion's den together. The cultural center was transformed into a glittering fantasy, thousands of lights, champagne towers, beautiful people in designer clothes pretending they cared more about charity than being seen. But Elena felt the shift the moment they walked in. Conversations faltered, heads turned. The energy in the room pivoted toward them like a compass finding north. Victor's hand settled on the small of her back, warm and possessive. To anyone watching, they looked like exactly what they were supposed to be. A couple comfortable with each other, confident in their connection. "Here we go," Victor murmured near her ear, and the crowd descended. The first hour was a blur of introductions and careful conversations. Society matrons who wanted to know wedding details. Business associates of her father offering congratulations that felt like assessments. Politicians who shook Victor's hand while calculating how his marriage to Elena might shift power dynamics. Through it all, Victor stayed close, his presence a shield against the more aggressive inquiries. He knew exactly how to deflect, redirect, and when necessary, end conversations with polite finality. Elena found herself impressed despite everything. Victor didn't just navigate this world, he controlled it with the same skill he probably used to manage his criminal empire. "Elena Ward." The voice came from behind her, smooth and faintly amused. Elena turned to find a woman in her 50s, blonde hair perfectly coiffed, wearing diamonds that could fund a small country. Catherine Blackwell, Chicago's reigning queen of high society and one of her father's oldest connections. "Mrs. Blackwell," Elena said, injecting warmth into her voice. "How lovely to see you." "Is it?" Catherine's smile was sharp. "I have to admit, I was surprised to hear about your engagement. 6 years away, and you come back engaged to Victor Hale. Quite the power move." "It's not a power move, it's a relationship." "Of course it is, dear." Catherine's eyes flicked to Victor, who had moved slightly closer. "Though one wonders about the timing. Your father's death, the inheritance complications, Marcus's legal challenges. This engagement solves a lot of problems very conveniently." "Catherine," Victor's voice held a note of warning, "if you have questions about our relationship, you can ask them directly." "Oh, I'm not questioning anything, Victor. I'm simply observing that Chicago loves a good strategic alliance, and this one is particularly fascinating." She turned back to Elena. "Your father would be proud. He always did believe in using every advantage available." Elena felt something cold settle in her chest. "My father believed in a lot of things, not all of them admirable." "True, but effective." Catherine sipped her champagne. "I hope you're prepared for what comes next, Elena. Marrying into Victor's world isn't like the business negotiations you're used to. It's considerably more dangerous." "I'm aware. Are you?" Catherine's expression turned almost sympathetic. "Because the people watching you tonight aren't all friends. Some of them would be delighted to see you fail. Or worse." "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning, from someone who's survived Chicago society longer than you've been alive." Catherine glanced around the ballroom. "Your cousin is here, by the way. He's been telling anyone who'll listen that this engagement is a farce. You might want to prepare for that confrontation." Before Elena could respond, Catherine drifted away into the crowd, leaving behind the scent of expensive perfume and veiled threats. Victor's hand tightened on Elena's back. "She's trying to rattle you. It's working. Don't let it." Catherine Blackwell makes a hobby out of unsettling people. She thinks it makes her powerful. Victor guided Elena toward the edge of the ballroom. "And she was right about one thing. Marcus is here. I saw him near the bar 10 minutes ago." Elena's stomach nodded. "I should talk to him." "Absolutely not. Not here, not tonight." "Victor, he's my cousin. I can't just avoid him." "You can when he's actively trying to destroy your life." Victor's voice was low and intense. "Marcus came here tonight to make a scene, to publicly challenge your engagement and make you look weak. If you confront him, you give him exactly what he wants. So what do? We dance." Victor took her hand, leading her toward the dance floor. "We show everyone here that we're completely unbothered by Marcus's theatrics, that we're so confident in our relationship that his opinion is irrelevant." Before Elena could argue, Victor pulled her into his arms as a waltz began, and suddenly they were dancing. Victor's hand settled at her waist, the other clasping hers with surprising gentleness. He moved with the kind of grace that suggested expensive lessons, guiding Elena through the steps with effortless precision. "I didn't know you could dance," Elena said, trying to focus on anything except how close they were. There's a lot you don't know about me. Victor's eyes held hers. Just like there's a lot I don't know about you, but we have time to learn. 1 year? 1 year, Victor agreed, but something in his tone suggested he was thinking beyond that deadline. They moved across the dance floor, and Elena became aware of eyes following them. The entire ballroom was watching Victor Hale dance with Vincent Ward's daughter, watching for cracks, for proof that this was all performance. Elena made a decision. She moved closer, letting her head rest briefly against Victor's shoulder in a gesture of trust that was pure theater but looked entirely real. Victor's arm tightened around her, and for just a moment, Elena let herself imagine this was real, that they were a real couple at a real party, dancing because they wanted to rather than because strategy demanded it. The fantasy was dangerous and desperately appealing. Elena, Victor's voice pulled her back to reality. Marcus is moving toward the edge of the dance floor. He's going to try something. Elena lifted her head, spotting her cousin through the crowd. Marcus was watching them with barely contained fury, a champagne glass in his hand and violence in his eyes. Let him, Elena said quietly. If he makes a scene, he's the one who looks unstable, not us. Victor's expression shifted into something that might have been pride. Smart. They continued dancing as Marcus moved closer, positioning himself where they'd have to pass him when the song ended. When the music finally stopped, Victor kept his arm around Elena's waist as they left the dance floor. Marcus stepped directly into their path. Cousin, he said, his voice carrying. How touching. You two look so in love. Almost believable. Elena met his gaze without flinching. Marcus, I didn't realize you were invited. I'm still a ward, still part of this family, despite your attempts to erase me from the inheritance. His eyes were bright with something that looked like champagne and rage mixed together. Tell me, Elena, does Victor know about the panic attacks you used to have? About the therapist you saw for 3 years after leaving Chicago? About how broken you really are underneath all that polish? The words hit like slaps. Elena felt Victor tense beside her, felt the dangerous shift in the air around them. But before Victor could respond, Elena spoke. You're right, Marcus. I was broken when I left Chicago. This city, this family, and people like you made sure of that. Her voice was steady, carrying to the people who'd stopped to watch. But I spent 6 years putting myself back together, building a life based on my own choices instead of our father's manipulation. So if you think throwing my past in my face is going to break me again, you're going to be disappointed. Marcus's smile turned cruel. Brave words. But we both know you're only marrying Victor because you're terrified of being alone. Of being as worthless as Father always said you were. That's enough. Victor's voice was lethal quiet. Is it? Marcus turned his attention to Victor. Tell me, Hale, what do you really see when you look at her? A partner? Or just another transaction to make your empire look legitimate? I see someone stronger than you'll ever be, Victor said coldly. Someone who walked away from power and built her own. Someone who doesn't need our marriage to prove her worth. She had that long before I came back into her life. Can you say the same, Marcus? Or are you just Vincent Ward's shadow, desperate for validation from a dead man? The crowd around them had gone completely silent. Marcus's face flushed dark red. You think marrying her protects you? You think the Ward name makes you untouchable? You're still just Chicago trash playing at respectability. Maybe, Victor agreed, but I'm trash with more power than you'll ever have, and I protect what's mine. His arm tightened around Elena. You want to come after Elena? You go through me, and we both know how that ends. The threat was clear, public, and absolute. Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but someone grabbed his arm, Lorenzo Gotti, looking furious. Enough, Gotti said quietly. This is neither the time nor the place, Marcus. Walk away. For a moment, Elena thought her cousin would actually throw a punch, but Gatti's grip was iron, and the older man's expression promised consequences. Marcus jerked his arm free. This isn't over, cousin, not by a long shot. He stalked away, leaving behind shocked whispers and fascinated stares. Gatti turned to Elena and Victor. My apologies. Marcus is under considerable stress. Marcus is a threat, Victor said flatly. And if he approaches Elena like that again, stress won't save him. Gatti's expression was unreadable. Duly noted. Perhaps it's best if you both leave, before this escalates further. Victor nodded once. We were just leaving anyway. He guided Elena through the crowd, which parted like water. Everyone suddenly very interested in their champagne or the architecture or anything except the drama they'd just witnessed. They made it to the car in tense silence. The moment the door closed behind them, Elena started shaking. That was, she started. A disaster, Victor finished grimly. I'm sorry. I should have anticipated Marcus would pull something like that. You warned me he would. I just didn't think he'd be so... Elena trailed off, searching for words. Vicious, Victor supplied. Marcus has everything to lose. People in that position get desperate. Desperate people are dangerous. Elena leaned her head back against the seat, feeling adrenaline crash into exhaustion. He knew things about my therapy, about the panic attacks. How did he know those things? He's been digging into your past, looking for ammunition. Victor's jaw tightened. I should have had someone watching him more closely. It's not your job to protect me from my own family. It is now. That's what this engagement means. Victor reached over, taking her hand. Elena, I need you to listen to me. Marcus crossed a line tonight. What he did wasn't just cruel, it was strategic. He wanted to make you look weak in front of Chicago's power structure, wanted to plant doubt about our relationship. He succeeded. No, he didn't. Victor's grip tightened. You stood there and turned his weapons back on him. You showed everyone that you're not the broken girl who left 6 years ago. You showed them strength. That matters more than whatever gossip Marcus tried to spread. Elena wanted to believe him, but Marcus's words kept echoing, worthless, broken, terrified of being alone. What if he's right? She whispered. What if I am just using you because I'm too scared to face this alone? Victor was quiet for a long moment. Then he raised her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt far too real for theater. Elena, everyone is scared of being alone. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. He lowered her hand but didn't release it. And yes, we're using each other. That's what partnerships are. Mutual use toward mutual benefit. But that doesn't make it less real. This protection I'm offering, it's real. This commitment to keeping you safe, real. Whatever else this marriage is or isn't, those things are true. Elena felt something crack open in her chest, a small fissure in the walls she'd built around her heart. Thank you, she said quietly, for tonight, for defending me. Always. Victor's voice was rough with emotion. He wasn't quite hiding. That's the promise, Elena. For this year and beyond, I protect you, no matter what. The car pulled up to Victor's building. They rode the elevator in charged silence, both processing what had happened. When they reached the penthouse, Elena headed for her room, needing space to think. But Victor's voice stopped her. Elena, wait. She turned. Victor stood in the middle of his living room, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. Move in, he said. Not after the wedding. Now, tonight. Because what happened at the gala proves that Marcus is escalating, and I need to know you're safe. He stopped, jaw working. Please, let me protect you properly. Elena looked at this man who'd destroyed her once and was now offering shelter. This complicated, dangerous, surprisingly gentle man who'd just publicly claimed her as his. She thought about her hotel room, about being alone with her thoughts and Marcus's threats. Then she thought about bulletproof windows and Victor's steady presence and the strange comfort of knowing someone was watching her back. Okay, Elena said. I'll move in. Relief flooded Victor's expression. I'll have your things brought over tomorrow. Victor? Yeah? What happens if this doesn't work? If the marriage doesn't protect us the way we think it will? Victor crossed the room, stopping close enough that Elena could see the flecks of gold in his eyes. Then we fight, he said simply. Together. Whatever comes, we face it as partners. That's the deal. Elena nodded, feeling the weight of that promise settle over her like armor. She went to bed in a room that would become hers, in a penthouse that would become home, engaged to a man who was equal parts danger and protection. And for the first time since returning to Chicago, Elena felt something that might have been hope. The city still wanted to destroy her. Marcus still plotted her downfall. Enemies still circled in the shadows. But she wasn't facing them alone anymore. That had to count for something. Elena woke to sunlight streaming through bulletproof windows and the disorienting realization that she was living in Victor Hale's penthouse. The emerald gown from last night hung on the closet door like evidence of a fever dream, but the bruises on her heart from Marcus's public attack were painfully real. Her phone showed 37 missed calls and twice as many text messages. Martin had sent updates throughout the night. Marcus had filed 2 more legal challenges before midnight. The gossip columns were running wild with speculation about the gala confrontation, and 3 different news outlets wanted interviews about the engagement. Elena ignored all of it and headed to the kitchen, desperate for coffee and normalcy. She found Victor already there, but he wasn't alone. A woman sat at the kitchen island, mid-50s, silver hair cut sharp as a blade, wearing a suit that screamed power and precision. She looked up when Elena entered, her eyes cataloging everything in seconds. "Miss Ward," the woman said, "I'm Rebecca Chen, Victor's chief of security. We need to talk about last night." Elena poured coffee, buying time. "What about last night?" "About the fact that Marcus Ward made direct threats against you in public. About the fact that half of Chicago now knows exactly how vulnerable you are." Rebecca's tone was professional but urgent. "We need to accelerate the security protocols." Victor leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Rebecca wants to add 2 more bodyguards to your detail and implement tracking on your phone." "Tracking?" "So we know where you are at all times," Rebecca explained. "Marcus isn't our only concern anymore. After last night's display, you've become a high-value target for anyone wanting to destabilize Victor's position. The Marconi family has already put out feelers about your movements." Elena's hand tightened on her coffee cup. "They're watching me. They're watching everyone associated with Victor. But you're the weak point now, the new variable." Rebecca pulled out a tablet, showing Elena a series of photographs. "These were taken yesterday. You at your hotel. You leaving the penthouse. You entering the gala. Someone is documenting your patterns." The images were professional quality, taken from distance but crystal clear. Elena felt violation crawl up her spine. "Who took these?" "We're not sure yet. Could be Marconi, could be Marcus's people, could be someone else entirely." Rebecca swiped to another image. This one showed Elena and Victor dancing, her head on his shoulder. "This one hit social media last night. 30,000 shares in 6 hours. You're not just Victor's fiancée anymore. You're a symbol of his legitimacy. That makes you incredibly valuable and incredibly dangerous to possess." "So, what do you recommend?" Elena asked, forcing her voice steady. "Lockdown protocols until the wedding, minimal public appearances, no movements without security clearance. And we move up the wedding date." Elena looked at Victor. "How much earlier?" "1 week," he said quietly. "I know it's fast, but Rebecca's right. Every day we wait is another day for our enemies to plan." 1 week. Elena set down her coffee cup before her shaking hands betrayed her. "That's insane." "That's survival." Victor moved closer, his presence solid and grounding. "Elena, I won't let anything happen to you. But I need you to trust me on this. We get married, we consolidate power, we eliminate the vulnerability window." "And what happens on our wedding day? You think our enemies will just accept defeat?" Rebecca answered. "They'll test you, push boundaries, look for cracks, which is why we're proposing something unconventional." She pulled up architectural plans on her tablet. "The wedding should be at Victor's estate outside the city. Controlled environment, limited access, security we can actually manage. It won't be the society spectacle people expect, but it will be safe. My father's associates will expect a traditional ceremony, something public. They'll get an intimate ceremony followed by a reception in the city the following week," Victor said. "We control the narrative, private vows, public celebration. It gives us flexibility and security." Elena studied the plans, her mind racing through implications. A small ceremony meant fewer witnesses, but also fewer chances for something to go wrong. It meant trusting Victor's security completely. It meant stepping fully into his world with no easy exit. "I need to see the estate," she said finally. "If I'm getting married there in a week, I should at least know what it looks like." Victor's expression shifted into something that might have been relief. "We can go today, this afternoon." "And my things from the hotel?" "Already being moved." Victor had the grace to look slightly apologetic. "I had Sarah coordinate with the hotel this morning. Everything will be here by noon." Elena should have been angry about the presumption. Instead, she felt oddly grateful that decisions were being made. that forward momentum existed when she felt paralyzed by too many threats. 1 week, she repeated. That doesn't give me time to plan anything. Dress, flowers, guests. I have people who can handle all of that, Victor interrupted gently. Elena, you just focus on staying alive and managing your father's empire. Let me handle the wedding logistics. This is insane, Elena said again, but there was less conviction in it this time. Rebecca stood, gathering her tablet. I'll brief the extended security team. Victor, I need you to sign off on the additional protocols by end of day. She left with the efficiency of someone who had a dozen emergencies to manage. Victor and Elena stood alone in the kitchen, the morning light making everything feel surreal. Are you okay? Victor asked. I don't know. Elena laughed, the sound brittle. 24 hours ago, I was just trying to survive a charity gala. Now I'm getting married in a week to escape assassination attempts. I don't even know what okay looks like anymore. Victor moved closer, careful not to crowd her. It looks like having coffee while the world tries to kill you. It looks like making strategic decisions even when you're terrified. It looks exactly like what you're doing right now. I'm not brave, Victor. I'm just out of better options. Bravery is doing what needs to be done despite the fear. That's all it ever is. He paused. The estate is about an hour outside the city. We should leave around 1 if you want to see it in daylight. Elena nodded, already feeling the day slipping away from her control. The next few hours passed in organized chaos. Her belongings arrived from the hotel in neat boxes that Sarah and James unpacked with military precision. Martin called 3 times with legal updates, all bad news about Marcus's challenges. And Victor disappeared into his office for calls that Elena tried not to think too hard about. By the time they left for the estate, Elena felt wrung out and hollowed. The drive took them through Chicago's suburbs and into rural Illinois, the landscape transforming from concrete and steel to rolling fields and scattered trees. Victor drove himself this time, dismissing the driver with a gesture that suggested he wanted privacy. They rode in silence for the first 20 minutes. Then Victor spoke. There's something you should know about the estate. Elena turned to look at him. What? I bought it 5 years ago, right after your father paid me to stay away from you. Victor's hands tightened on the steering wheel. I told myself it was an investment. Property values, development potential, all the rational reasons. But the truth is, I bought it because it reminded me of what I'd given up. I don't understand. You told me once, at one of your father's parties, that you dreamed of living somewhere you could see stars, somewhere quiet enough to think. Victor's voice was rough with memory. This place has the darkest skies in the region. On clear nights, you can see the Milky Way. Elena's breath caught. She'd forgotten that conversation, forgotten the girl who'd shared dreams with a man she thought might love her back. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to know that 6 years ago, when I took your father's money and broke your heart, part of me broke too. I've spent these years building power and telling myself it was enough. But it wasn't. It never was. Victor glanced at her, his expression raw. This marriage might have started as strategy, Elena, but for me, it's also a second chance to do right by you, to be someone worthy of the trust you're placing in me. Elena didn't know what to say. Anger and longing warred in her chest, old wounds opening alongside tentative hope. Don't make promises you can't keep, she said finally. I'm not. Everything I'm telling you is true. Victor turned down a private road, gravel crunching under the tires. And if you hate the estate, we'll find somewhere else for the ceremony. But I wanted you to see it first. They crested a hill, and Elena's breath stopped completely. The estate sprawled across the landscape like something from a dream, a stone manor house surrounded by gardens that had been designed for beauty and privacy in equal measure. Behind it, a small lake reflected the afternoon sky. Trees created natural barriers that felt protective rather than confining. It was stunning, peaceful. Everything that Chicago wasn't. Victor parked in front of the main house and turned to gauge her reaction. It's beautiful, Elena whispered. Come inside. The interior matched the exterior's elegance, hardwood floors, exposed beams, floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the landscape like living art. But it wasn't ostentatious. Every detail suggested comfort and permanence rather than displays of wealth. Victor led her through rooms that had been furnished but felt unoccupied, as if waiting for someone to make them home. I've never actually lived here, he admitted. I come out on weekends sometimes, but it's mostly been empty. Why? Because it felt like a fantasy, a place that didn't fit the life I was actually living. Victor opened French doors that led to a stone terrace. But if we have the ceremony here, maybe it becomes real. Maybe it becomes somewhere you'd actually want to be. Elena stepped onto the terrace, looking out over gardens that stretched toward the lake. The quiet was profound, just wind through trees and distant bird calls. I can see the appeal, she said carefully. But Victor, having the wedding here means bringing our war to your sanctuary. Are you sure that's what you want? I want you safe. Everything else is negotiable. Victor joined her at the terrace railing. And after the wedding, after the reception in the city, this could be somewhere you come when Chicago gets too heavy. A place that's just yours. The offer was too generous, too weighted with implications about a future beyond 1 year. Don't, Elena said. Don't make this more than it is. We have a deal, 1 year. After that, you're free to leave. Victor finished. I know. But that doesn't mean I can't hope you might want to stay. Elena turned to face him fully. Why? Why would you want that? You barely know me anymore. I know that you walked into a room full of predators and held your ground. I know that you stood up to Marcus when he tried to destroy you publicly. I know that you're brave enough to marry someone dangerous to protect what's yours. Victor's expression was achingly honest. I know enough to know I want to learn everything else. Victor, her phone rang, shattering the moment. Elena pulled it out, seeing Martin's name. I should take this, she said. Of course. She walked back inside, answering as she moved through the beautiful empty rooms. Martin, what's wrong? Everything. Martin's voice was strained. Marcus just held a press conference. He's claiming that you're mentally unfit to manage the Ward estate, that Victor is manipulating you, and he's produced documents supposedly from your therapist in New York questioning your emotional stability. Elena felt the floor tilt beneath her. Those are confidential. He can't. He did. They're all over the news. Elena, this is bad. He's not just fighting you in court anymore. He's trying to destroy your reputation completely. How did he get my therapy records? I don't know, but we need to respond immediately. If we don't, the narrative becomes that you're an unstable woman being controlled by a criminal. Martin paused. Elena, I think we need to consider postponing the wedding. Give ourselves time to fight this properly. No. The word came out hard and absolute. We move forward. The wedding happens in 1 week exactly as planned. Elena, think about this. I am thinking. Marcus wants me to look weak and manipulated. Postponing the wedding proves his point. Going through with it shows strength. Elena's voice steadied with certainty. We're not giving him that victory. Silence. Then Martin sighed. All right, but we need a PR strategy, something that counters his narrative. I'll handle it. Elena hung up and turned to find Victor standing in the doorway, his expression dark with controlled fury. I heard, he said, Marcus needs to be dealt with. What does that mean? It means I'm done playing nice. Victor pulled out his own phone. He went after your medical records. That's not just unethical, it's illegal. And it gives us leverage. What kind of leverage? The kind that ends this. Victor made a call, his voice dropping into the cold command Elena had heard him use with Rebecca. I need everything on Marcus Ward, every dirty deal, every illegal arrangement, every skeleton in every closet, and I need it by tomorrow morning. He listened for a moment, then continued. I don't care what it costs. This ends now. Victor hung up and met Elena's eyes. Your cousin wants to play dirty? We'll show him what dirty actually looks like. Elena should have been horrified. Should have protested that they couldn't sink to Marcus's level. Instead, she felt savage satisfaction. What are you planning? We expose him, completely. The business fraud, the illegal kickbacks, the deals he made with your father's enemies, everything that proves he's not fit to run a lemonade stand, let alone the Ward empire. And if that destroys him? Then he should have thought about that before he leaked your confidential medical information to the press. Victor's expression was granite. Elena, I told you I protect what's mine. Marcus just made this personal. He's going to regret it. Elena thought about her cousin's cruelty at the gala, about the therapy records he'd stolen and weaponized, about 6 years of him waiting like a vulture for her father to die so he could claim everything. Do it, she said. Burn his world down. Victor's eyes flashed with approval and something darker. The wedding is in 6 days. We'll release everything the day before. Let Chicago see exactly who Marcus Ward really is right before you and I stand up together and claim your inheritance. He'll retaliate. Let him try. By then, you'll be my wife. Attacking you will be attacking me, and I guarantee Marcus doesn't have the resources for that war. Elena moved to the window looking out at the peaceful landscape that would soon host her wedding, a ceremony that had started as strategy and was becoming something far more complicated. I should go back to the city, she said. Face the media. Make a statement. Not alone, Victor joined her at the window. We do this together. Unified front, remember? Victor, you don't have to. Yes, I do. That's what partnership means. He turned her to face him, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Elena, I need you to understand something. What Marcus did today wasn't just an attack on you. It was an attack on us, on this alliance we're building, and I don't let attacks go unanswered. Even if answering them puts you at risk, especially then, because protecting you protects us both. Victor's grip tightened slightly. Trust me on this. We go back to Chicago, we make a statement that shows strength and unity, and we let Marcus know that he just made the biggest mistake of his life. Elena searched his face for calculation or manipulation, but found only fierce determination. Victor meant every word. He was ready to go to war for her. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Okay, she said, let's go back and fight. They drove back to Chicago in focused silence, both preparing for the battle ahead. By the time they reached the city limits, Victor had coordinated with his PR team and scheduled a press conference for that evening. The penthouse was controlled chaos when they arrived. Rebecca had assembled a crisis management team, lawyers, PR specialists, and security personnel who moved through the space with military efficiency. We've drafted a statement, a woman in her 30s said, handing Elena a tablet. It addresses the therapy records breach, reframes your mental health care as responsible self-care, and questions Marcus's ethics and motives. Elena read through it, impressed despite her frayed nerves. The statement was perfect, dignified but pointed, acknowledging the reality while spinning it into evidence of strength. This works, she said. When do we deliver it? 6 p.m. We've booked the Regency Hotel conference room. Every major outlet will be there. The woman hesitated. Miss Ward, they're going to ask difficult questions about your therapy, about the engagement timeline, about whether Victor is manipulating you. You need to be prepared. I am prepared. Elena set down the tablet. Marcus wants to make me look weak and controlled. I'm going to show Chicago exactly how wrong he is. Victor appeared at her side. We're doing this together. You answer the questions about your personal history. I answer questions about our relationship. We present a completely united front. The next 2 hours were a crash course in crisis management. Elena practiced answers to hostile questions, learned how to deflect and redirect, and rehearsed looking calm while discussing the most painful parts of her past. By the time they left for the press conference, she felt armored and ready. The Regency's conference room was packed with reporters, cameras, and the kind of predatory energy that came with a developing scandal. Elena walked in with Victor's hand at the small of her back, their body language screaming partnership and strength. They took their positions behind a podium bristling with microphones. Elena spoke first, her voice steady and clear. Thank you all for coming. I'm here to address the documents that my cousin Marcus Ward illegally obtained and distributed to the media. Yes, I attended therapy after leaving Chicago 6 years ago. I sought help processing a difficult period in my life, and I'm proud of that choice. Mental health care isn't weakness, it's wisdom. The fact that Marcus would weaponize confidential medical information tells you everything you need to know about his character and his desperation to claim an inheritance that isn't his. She paused, letting that land. I returned to Chicago to mourn my father and manage his estate as he wished. I became engaged to Victor Hale because he represents stability, protection, and partnership in a complicated transition. Our relationship is built on mutual respect and shared goals. Anyone suggesting otherwise is either lying or projecting their own inability to imagine healthy partnership. Questions erupted immediately. Miss Ward, how do you respond to accusations that you're being manipulated? Elena's smile was sharp. I spent 6 years building a successful business career based on my own decisions and abilities. I negotiated complex deals, managed difficult personalities, and created value without anyone's help. The idea that I'm suddenly incapable of making strategic choices insults that entire track record. I chose to marry Victor because it serves my interests and protects my inheritance. That's not manipulation. That's intelligence. Mr. Hale, what do you gain from this marriage? Victor leaned into the microphone. I gain a partner who's brilliant, brave, and willing to fight for what's hers. I gain political stability and legitimate business connections. And yes, I gain access to the Ward family's influence. This is a mutually beneficial arrangement between equals. Anyone who sees manipulation in that is revealing their own inability to recognize female agency. But you rejected Miss Ward 6 years ago. Why marry her now? 6 years ago was complicated. I made choices I regret to protect someone I cared about from dangers she didn't understand. Now those dangers are managed, and I have the privilege of making better choices. Victor's hand found Elena's, their fingers intertwining in front of the cameras. I'm grateful Elena gave me a second chance to be the partner she deserves. The questions continued, each one designed to find cracks in their story. But Elena and Victor had prepared well. They deflected, redirected, and maintained absolute unity throughout. Then a reporter from a tabloid raised her hand. Miss Ward, your cousin claims you're mentally unstable and unfit to manage your father's empire. Do you have any response to that? Elena felt Victor tense beside her, but she kept her voice level. My response is that Marcus is terrified. He spent 3 years assuming he'd inherit my father's empire. My return shattered that assumption. So he's lashing out with lies and stolen medical records because he has no legitimate claim. The courts will determine who's fit to manage the Ward estate, but I'm confident that when they compare my business track record to Marcus's history of fraud and questionable dealings, the choice will be obvious. What fraud are you referring to? Elena smiled. Ask Marcus. I'm sure he'd be happy to explain. It was a shot across the bow, a warning that they had ammunition and weren't afraid to use it. The press conference ended shortly after. Elena and Victor left through a back exit where security was waiting. That was perfect, Victor said once they were in the car. You were perfect. We were perfect. Elena leaned back against the seat, adrenaline crashing into exhaustion. But Marcus is going to retaliate. You know that. I'm counting on it. Let him make the next move. It'll give us justification for what we're about to do. Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Martin. Excellent work at the press conference. But Marcus just filed for an emergency injunction to freeze the estate pending mental competency hearings. This is getting uglier. She showed the text to Victor, who read it with cold fury. He's escalating faster than I expected, Victor said, which means we move up our timeline. I'll have everything on Marcus ready by tomorrow. We release it all at once and bury him. And if it starts a war? Then we finish the war before the wedding. Victor's expression was hard. Elena, I told you I protect what's mine. Marcus is about to learn what that actually means. They rode the rest of the way in tense silence. Back at the penthouse, Elena retreated to her room, needing space to process everything. She stood at the window, looking out over Chicago's glittering skyline, thinking about her cousin's desperation and Victor's cold determination to destroy him. This wasn't the life she'd planned. This wasn't the person she'd thought she'd become. But as Elena watched the city lights blur through her reflection in bulletproof glass, she realized something important. She'd spent 6 years running from Chicago's cruelty. Now she was standing in the heart of it, armed and dangerous and ready to fight back. The girl who'd fled in humiliation was gone. In her place stood someone harder, smarter, willing to make ruthless choices to survive. Victor had called her brave. Martin had called her smart. Marcus had called her weak. Tomorrow, Chicago would learn the truth. Elena Ward was done being anyone's victim, and anyone who underestimated her was going to regret it. She pulled out her phone and texted Victor. Release everything on Marcus tomorrow morning. Let's end this. The response came immediately. Consider it done. Elena set down her phone and looked at the ring on her finger, Victor's mother's ring, catching the city lights and throwing them back in fragments of fire. In 5 days, she'd marry the man who'd once destroyed her. In 5 days, she'd claim an empire built on blood and secrets. In 5 days, she'd prove that second chances could be weapons if you were brave enough to wield them. Chicago wanted a war? Elena Ward was ready to give them one they'd never forget. Dawn broke over Chicago with the kind of clarity that felt like an omen. Elena stood at the penthouse windows watching the city wake up, knowing that in a few hours, Victor's team would release everything they'd compiled on Marcus. By noon, her cousin's world would be burning. She should have felt guilty. Instead, she felt calm. Victor found her there, 2 cups of coffee in hand. He'd been up for hours coordinating the release strategy with his team. The exhaustion showed in the lines around his eyes, but his determination never wavered. "It's ready," he said, handing her a cup. "Financial fraud going back 7 years. Bribes to city officials. Deals with the Marconi family that directly violated your father's territorial agreements. And proof that he's been embezzling from the Ward estate since the day Vincent died." Elena took the coffee, her hand steady. "When does it go live?" 9 a.m. We've coordinated with 3 major news outlets and the district attorney's office. By the time Marcus knows what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it. Victor paused. "Elena, once we do this, there's no going back. Marcus will be destroyed. Arrested, probably. The Ward family name will take a hit." "The Ward family name was built on violence and exploitation," Elena said quietly. "Maybe it's time for it to burn a little." Victor's expression shifted into something that might have been admiration. "You've changed since coming back to Chicago. You're harder now." "I had to be. This city doesn't reward softness." "No," Victor agreed, "it doesn't." They stood together in the pre-dawn light, 2 people about to declare war on Elena's own blood. The weight of it settled between them like a physical presence. "Are you sure about this?" Victor asked one last time. Elena thought about Marcus's cruelty at the gala, about her stolen therapy records, about 3 years of him circling her father's empire like a vulture waiting for death. She thought about the girl she'd been 6 years ago and the woman she'd become. "I'm sure," she said. "Do it." Victor made the call. The next 3 hours were a masterclass in controlled chaos. Victor's PR team coordinated releases across multiple platforms. Legal documents hit the district attorney's desk with evidence so comprehensive that arrest warrants were inevitable. News outlets ran stories with headlines that would end Marcus's credibility permanently. By 8:30, Elena's phone was exploding with calls from associates, lawyers, and people she barely knew, all wanting to know if the allegations were true. Martin called at 8:45, his voice tight with shock. "Elena, what have you done? The entire city is talking about Marcus. The evidence is everywhere. The DA is already moving to indict." "I did what was necessary," Elena said calmly. "Marcus tried to destroy me with stolen medical records. I responded with facts about his criminal activity. There's a difference. This is going to have consequences. The associates won't like you using Victor's resources to take down family. Then they'll have to decide if they care more about family loyalty or about working with a documented criminal." Elena's voice was steel. "I'm done playing nice, Martin. Marcus wanted war. He got it." "What about the wedding? This happened 5 days before you're supposed to marry Victor. The timing looks calculated?" "It is. That's the point." Elena watched news coverage on Victor's multiple screens, seeing Marcus's face next to words like fraud, embezzlement, organized crime. "We're sending a message. Anyone who comes after me faces consequences. Anyone who threatens this alliance gets destroyed." Martin was quiet for a long moment. "You sound like your father." The words should have stung. Instead, Elena felt oddly validated. Maybe that's not entirely bad. Vincent Ward knew how to consolidate power. "I'm just applying his lessons more selectively." "Be careful, Elena. Power changes people. I'd hate to see you become what you're fighting against." "I won't," Elena promised. "Because unlike my father, I know when to stop." Marcus crossed lines that couldn't be ignored. But once he's dealt with, I'm going back to building something better, not destroying for the sake of destruction. She hung up and turned to find Victor watching her from across the room. "Martin's worried about you," Victor said. "Martin's always worried. It's his default state." Elena moved to the windows, watching Chicago react to the news. "How long before Marcus responds?" "He already did. 3 attempted calls to me, all of which I ignored. 4 messages threatening legal action. 1 very creative death threat." Victor's mouth curved without humor. "He's panicking." "Good. Let him panic." Victor crossed the room to stand beside her. "Elena, there's something you should know. The Marconi family reached out this morning. They want a meeting. Elena's pulse quickened. About what? About the power vacuum Marcus's arrest will create. About their business arrangements with the Ward estate. About making sure the transition doesn't disrupt their interests. Victor's expression was carefully neutral. They're testing us, seeing if we're stable enough to honor existing agreements or vulnerable enough to exploit. When do they want to meet? Tomorrow, the day before the wedding. Elena laughed, the sound sharp with disbelief. Of course they do. Maximum pressure, minimum time to prepare. We can refuse. Tell them to wait until after the wedding. No. Elena straightened, decision crystallizing. We meet with them. Show them that we're not afraid and we're not vulnerable. That the Ward-Hale alliance is strong enough to handle whatever they throw at us. Victor studied her face. You're sure? The Marconis aren't like the associates or the legal challenges. They're actually dangerous. So are we. Elena met his eyes. Aren't we? Victor's expression shifted into something fierce and proud. Yes, we are. The rest of the day unfolded with relentless momentum. Marcus was formally arrested at 2 p.m., led out of his downtown office in handcuffs while cameras captured every humiliating second. The Associate Board held an emergency meeting and voted unanimously to remove him from any position of authority within the Ward empire. By sunset, Marcus Ward was finished. Elena watched it all unfold with satisfaction that felt earned. She'd been called weak, manipulated, mentally unfit. Now she'd proven that she was none of those things. She was strategic, ruthless when necessary, and willing to do whatever it took to protect what was hers. The question was whether that made her strong or just as damaged as the people she was fighting. Victor found her in the guest room that had become hers, sitting on the bed with documents spread around her like a paper fortress. You should eat something, he said. Mrs. Chen left dinner. I'm not hungry. Elena. Victor sat beside her, careful not to disturb the papers. You won today. Marcus is finished. The estate is secure. You can breathe for a minute. Can I? Elena gestured to the documents. These are the agreements the Marconis want to discuss tomorrow. Protection rackets, money laundering, loan sharking. My father's legacy is soaked in blood and exploitation. Destroying Marcus doesn't change that. So change it. You wanted to dismantle the criminal operations. Start with the Marconi agreements. And risk starting a war with one of Chicago's major crime families 3 days before our wedding? You risked that when you destroyed Marcus. Victor's voice was gentle but firm. Elena, you can't have it both ways. Either you're willing to fight for what you believe in, or you're not. Which is it? Elena looked at the man who'd once broken her heart and was now pushing her to be braver than she felt. The irony was almost too much. I want to end the protection rackets, she said finally. The ones targeting immigrant communities, small businesses that can't afford to fight back. Those end immediately. The Marconis can find other revenue streams or go to hell. Victor's mouth curved. That's going to make tomorrow's meeting interesting. Good. I'm tired of interesting meetings that end with me compromising my values. Elena gathered the documents into a stack. We tell the Marconis that the Ward Empire is transitioning to legitimate business only. They can adapt or they can find new partners, but we're not continuing my father's worst practices just to keep the peace. They won't like it. I don't care. Elena stood, energy returning. Victor, you said this marriage makes us partners. That means we make these decisions together. So I'm asking you, will you back me on this? Even if it creates problems? Victor stood as well, his expression serious. Always. Whatever you need to do to sleep at night, I support it, even if it means telling the Marconis to get lost. The relief Elena felt was visceral. She'd expected pushback, expected Victor to prioritize stability over ethics. Instead, he was offering unconditional support. Thank you, she said quietly. Don't thank me yet. Wait until we survive tomorrow's meeting. Victor moved toward the door, then paused. Elena, there's something I need to tell you about why I really bought the estate. You said it reminded you of me, of what you gave up. That's true, but it's not the whole truth. Victor turned back, his expression vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I bought it the week after I rejected you, when your father's money was still fresh in my account and the guilt was eating me alive. I bought it because I thought maybe someday I'd be worthy of the kind of life you dreamed about. Somewhere quiet, somewhere safe, somewhere that wasn't built on violence and fear. Elena's breath caught. Victor, I know this started as strategy. I know we have an agreement about 1 year and then we walk away. But Elena, I need you to know that for me, this stopped being just strategy the moment you walked back into my life. Maybe it never was. He paused, jaw working. I'm not asking you to change the deal. I'm just telling you the truth. Because in 4 days we're getting married, and I don't want to start a partnership built on lies. Elena stared at him, her carefully constructed emotional walls cracking under the weight of his honesty. I don't know what to do with that, she admitted. You don't have to do anything. Just know it's true. Victor's expression shifted back to something more controlled. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. He left before Elena could respond, closing the door gently behind him. Elena sat back down on the bed, surrounded by documents about her father's criminal empire, wearing a ring that belonged to Victor's dead mother, 4 days away from a wedding that was supposed to be temporary. And she realized with stunning clarity that nothing about this situation was simple anymore. The meeting with the Marconis was set for a warehouse in the industrial district, neutral territory that belonged to neither family. Elena dressed for war in a black suit that made her look like death and money in equal measure. Victor wore similar armor, and together they looked like exactly what they were becoming, a force to be reckoned with. The warehouse was guarded by men who looked like they ate violence for breakfast. Sarah and James flanked Elena as she and Victor walked inside, their presence a statement about security and preparedness. The Marconi family was already waiting. 3 generations of organized crime sitting at a folding table like they were negotiating a construction contract instead of protection rackets and money laundering. Don Marconi himself sat at the center, 75 years old, with eyes that had seen everything and forgiven nothing. His son Franco sat to his right, younger but no less dangerous. And his grandson Rico completed the trio, watching Elena with the kind of calculation that made her skin crawl. Miss Ward, Don Marconi said, his voice gravelly with age and cigarettes. Or should I call you Mrs. Hale, since the wedding is in 3 days? Miss Ward is fine until the ceremony, Elena said coolly. Thank you for meeting with us. We didn't have much choice. Your fiancé was quite insistent. Don Marconi gestured to the empty chairs across from them. Please, sit. Let's discuss business like civilized people. Elena and Victor sat, maintaining perfect composure despite the tension radiating from the Marconi family. Your father and I did business for 30 years, Don Marconi continued. He was a hard man, but he was fair. He understood that certain arrangements benefit everyone. I hope you understand the same. I understand that my father built an empire on exploitation and violence, Elena said bluntly. I'm not interested in continuing that legacy. Franco leaned forward, his expression darkening. You're not interested in honoring agreements your father made? Agreements that kept your family safe all these years? I'm interested in running legitimate businesses. The protection rackets end. The loan sharking ends. The money laundering through Ward Properties ends. Elena kept her voice level. I'm willing to discuss legitimate business partnerships, real estate development, import-export with legal goods, financial investments that don't involve breaking the law. But the criminal operations are over. The silence that followed was deadly. Don Marconi's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. You're making demands that could have serious consequences, Miss Ward. I'm making changes that reflect my values, Elena corrected. If those changes create problems for your family, I'm sorry. But they're not negotiable. Rico laughed, the sound harsh. You think marrying Victor Hale makes you untouchable? You think his reputation protects you from reality? You're a naive little girl playing at power. Victor's hand shot out, grabbing Rico's wrist before the younger man could react. His voice was quiet and absolutely lethal. Speak to my fiancé with respect, or the next words out of your mouth will be your last. Don Marconi raised a hand, a gesture that made Victor release Rico but didn't ease the tension. Victor, I understand you're protective, but perhaps you should let Miss Ward fight her own battles. She is fighting her own battle, Victor said. I'm just making sure everyone understands the consequences of disrespect. Don Marconi turned his attention back to Elena. You're willing to risk war over principle? That's either very brave or very stupid. It's necessary, Elena said. My father's empire was built on hurting vulnerable people. I won't continue that. If standing by that conviction means fighting you, then we fight. Even knowing that we have resources you can't match, connections that reach into every corner of this city, even knowing that. Elena leaned forward. Don Marconi, I understand you're trying to intimidate me, trying to make me back down like my father probably would have wanted me to. But I'm not my father, and I'm not afraid of you. The old man studied her for a long moment. Then, shockingly, he smiled. You have spine. I respect that. Your father raised a fool for a son in Marcus, but apparently he raised a fighter for a daughter. I raised myself, Elena corrected quietly. Even better. Don Marconi sat back. Very well, Miss Ward, we'll end the protection rackets and loan operations tied to Ward properties. But we expect compensation for lost revenue, and we expect favorable terms on any legitimate partnerships you're offering. Fair enough. My lawyers will coordinate with yours on the details. Elena extended her hand across the table. Do we have an agreement? Don Marconi took her hand, his grip surprisingly strong for a man his age. We have an agreement. For now. But Miss Ward, understand something. This peace only lasts as long as you can maintain it. Show weakness, and we'll reconsider our position. I won't show weakness. We'll see. Don Marconi released her hand. Congratulations on your upcoming wedding. I look forward to seeing how long this alliance of yours actually lasts. The Marconis left with their guards, the warehouse emptying until only Elena, Victor, and their security remained. The moment the door closed behind the crime family, Elena's legs nearly gave out. Victor caught her, his arm around her waist providing support. You were incredible, Sut, he said. I've never seen anyone stand up to Don Marconi like that. I was terrified the entire time. I know, but you didn't show it. That's what matters. Victor guided her toward the car. You just renegotiated terms with one of Chicago's most dangerous families. And you won. Elena laughed, the sound edged with hysteria. I won a temporary peace. They'll test us, push boundaries, look for chances to undermine the agreement. Then we'll handle it together, like we handled Marcus, like we'll handle whatever comes next. Victor helped her into the car. Elena, you're building something better than what your father had. It's not going to be easy, but it's going to be worth it. The wedding day arrived with impossible speed. Elena woke in the estate's master bedroom. She'd moved out the night before for tradition's sake, surrounded by flowers and chaos, as the wedding coordinator directed an army of vendors transforming the property into something magical. The ceremony would be small, fewer than 50 guests, all carefully vetted by Rebecca's security team. The associate board would be there, along with key political allies and a handful of people Elena actually cared about. Martin would walk her down the aisle since she had no family left worth claiming. Elena stood at the window overlooking the gardens where she'd marry Victor in 3 hours, trying to sort through emotions that refused to be categorized. This was supposed to be strategic, a 1-year arrangement to protect her inheritance and give Victor political legitimacy. But Victor's confession about buying the estate, his unwavering support through every crisis, the way he looked at her like she was worth fighting for, it had all complicated things beyond repair. A knock on the door interrupted her spiral. Come in. Sarah entered, carrying a garment bag. The dress arrived. Want to try it one more time? Might as well make sure it still fits. Sarah helped Elena into the gown, a stunning creation in ivory silk that managed to be both elegant and powerful. It fit perfectly, transforming Elena into a bride who looked like she could conquer kingdoms or break hearts with equal efficiency. You look beautiful, Sarah said softly. Victor's going to lose his mind when he sees you. Elena studied her reflection, seeing a woman who'd survived her father's death, her cousin's betrayal, and Chicago's cruelty. A woman who'd stood up to crime families and renegotiated her entire inheritance on her own terms. Do you think this is crazy? She asked Sarah. Marrying someone I barely know to protect an empire I didn't ask for. Sarah considered the question seriously. I think it's strategic, but I also think you and Victor have something real developing under all that strategy, whether you're ready to admit it or not. It's supposed to be temporary. Plans change. People change. Maybe temporary becomes permanent if you're brave enough to let it. Sarah adjusted Elena's veil. Or maybe you honor the original deal and walk away in a year. Either way, you're making your own choices. That's what matters. Elena nodded, filing away Sarah's wisdom for later examination. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of final preparations. Makeup and hair that made Elena look like the best version of herself. Jewelry that included Victor's mother's ring and the diamond earrings from her own mother. A bouquet of white roses that symbolized new beginnings. When Martin arrived to escort her down the aisle, Elena was as ready as she'd ever be. "You look stunning," Martin said, offering his arm. "Your father would have been proud." "My father would have been calculating political advantages," Elena corrected. "But thank you." They walked through the house and out to the gardens where chairs had been arranged in neat rows, facing a flower-covered arch. The guests were already seated, associates in expensive suits, politicians with practiced smiles, and a handful of faces Elena actually wanted to see. And at the end of the aisle, waiting beneath the arch, stood Victor. He looked devastating in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his expression carefully controlled. But when his eyes found Elena, something raw and honest flickered across his face. Want, hope, fear. Everything Elena was feeling reflected back at her. She walked down the aisle on Martin's arm, each step bringing her closer to a future she couldn't quite see but was choosing anyway. Martin placed her hand in Victor's with a gentle squeeze of encouragement, then stepped back. Elena and Victor stood facing each other, surrounded by witnesses and sunlight and the weight of everything that had brought them to this moment. The officiant began the ceremony with traditional words about love and commitment. Elena barely heard them. She was too focused on Victor's hands holding hers, steady and warm and real. When it came time for vows, Victor spoke first. "Elena, 6 years ago, I made the biggest mistake of my life by pushing you away. I told myself it was for your protection, but really I was just afraid. Afraid of caring about someone more than I cared about power. Afraid of being vulnerable." His voice was low but unwavering. "Today, I'm choosing differently. I'm choosing you. Not because strategy demands it, but because you're the bravest, most remarkable person I've ever met. And whatever time we have together, 1 year or 50, I promise to be worthy of your trust. To protect you. To fight beside you. To be the partner you deserve." Elena's eyes burned with unshed tears. She'd prepared clinical vows about partnership and mutual respect. But standing there with Victor's honesty ringing in her ears, those words felt inadequate. "Victor," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "you broke my heart once, shattered it so completely I thought I'd never recover. But these past weeks have shown me that people are more than their worst moments. You've stood beside me through every crisis, supported my choices even when they created problems for you, made me feel strong instead of protected." She paused, gathering courage. "I don't know what happens after this year. I don't know if what we're building is permanent or temporary, but I know that right now, in this moment, I'm choosing you too. As my partner, my ally, and maybe, if we're both brave enough, something more." The officiant pronounced them married, and Victor kissed her with a tenderness that felt like a promise. The reception happened back in the city the following week as planned, a massive celebration designed to show Chicago that the Ward-Hale alliance was strong and permanent. But the real ceremony, the one that mattered, had happened in the garden with honest vows and hope that felt dangerously real. The weeks following the wedding were a whirlwind of change. Elena systematically dismantled her father's criminal operations, replacing them with legitimate businesses that actually helped communities instead of exploiting them. The associates grumbled, but ultimately respected her decisiveness. The Marconi family tested boundaries but found Elena and Victor's united front impossible to break. And through it all, the marriage that was supposed to be strategy evolved into something neither of them had planned for. They started small, dinner conversations that stretched past midnight, morning coffee rituals that became sacred, moments of vulnerability that built trust brick by careful brick. Victor told Elena about growing up in poverty, about the violence that had shaped him, about his dreams for a life beyond crime. Elena shared her own scars, her fears, her slowly growing belief that maybe she deserved good things. 3 months into their marriage, Elena woke to find Victor already up, standing at the penthouse windows with coffee in hand. "You're thinking too loud," she said, moving to join him. Victor smiled, passing her his coffee cup. "I was thinking about the 1-year deadline, about what happens when we reach it." Elena's heart clenched. "We still have 9 months." I know, but Elena, I need to tell you something. Victor turned to face her fully. I don't want this to end. I don't want 1 year, I want forever. The confession hung between them, vulnerable and terrifying and perfect. Victor, you don't have to answer now. I just needed you to know. This stopped being an arrangement for me months ago. Maybe it never was. His expression was achingly honest. I love you, Elena. However long it took, whatever complications exist, that's the truth. And if in 9 months you decide you want to walk away, I'll honor our agreement. But I hope you won't. Elena set down the coffee cup with shaking hands. She thought about the girl who'd been rejected 6 years ago, about the woman she'd become, about the partnership she'd built with the man standing in front of her. I don't want to walk away either, she said quietly. I'm terrified of that, of wanting this to be real and having it fall apart. But Victor, somewhere between Marcus's arrest and renegotiating with the Marconis and learning how you take your coffee, I fell in love with you too. Victor's expression transformed into pure joy. Yeah? Yeah. Elena moved into his arms, feeling like she was finally home. So maybe we rewrite the deal. Maybe instead of 1 year and then walking away, we make this permanent. For real. Not because strategy demands it, but because we choose it. I choose it, Victor said immediately. Every day, for the rest of my life, I choose you. He kissed her then, and it felt like every kiss should feel, like promise and passion and partnership all wrapped together. We should probably tell people, Elena said when they finally broke apart. Martin's going to have a heart attack when he finds out the strategic marriage became a real one. Let him. Everyone else too. Victor's smile was brilliant. Let Chicago see that we didn't just survive our arrangement, we built something better than anything your father or my enemies could have imagined. 6 months later, Elena stood on the terrace of the estate, watching the sun set over gardens that had become her sanctuary. The Ward Empire had been completely restructured, legitimate businesses that employed people fairly, community programs that gave back, and not a single protection racket in sight. The associates had adapted or been replaced. The Marconis maintained respectful distance, and Marcus was serving a 10-year sentence for fraud and embezzlement. Victor found her there, sliding his arms around her waist from behind. Thinking, he asked, about how far we've come, about where we started. Elena leaned back against him, about the fact that the 1-year deadline is in 3 months and we're not going anywhere. Best contract renegotiation I've ever made. Elena laughed. Same. They stood together as darkness fell and stars emerged, the same stars Elena had once dreamed about seeing somewhere quiet and safe. The same stars she could now see every weekend at the estate she shared with the man she loved. Chicago had tried to break her. Her father had tried to control her. Marcus had tried to destroy her. But Elena Ward had survived all of it. More than survived. She'd thrived. Built an empire on her own terms. Married for strategy and found love anyway. Proved that second chances could transform into something beautiful if you were brave enough to fight for them. I love you, she said, turning in Victor's arms to face him. I love you too, Victor replied, today and every day after. They kissed under the stars at the estate that symbolized everything they'd built together, and Elena felt complete in a way she'd never imagined possible. The marriage that started as protection became partnership. The partnership became love. And the love became the foundation for a life neither of them had dared to dream about. Chicago's most feared crime boss and Vincent Ward's once broken daughter had rewritten every rule about power, loyalty, and what it meant to choose each other. And they lived that choice every single day, building something stronger than fear, deeper than strategy, and more lasting than any empire. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, they were home. And together, they rewrote the ending that everyone else had tried to write for them, transforming obligation into choice, strategy into love, and survival into the kind of happiness that only comes from fighting for what you believe in. The city lights glittered in the distance like scattered diamonds, and Elena Ward Hale stood with her husband under stars that had witnessed their entire journey, from humiliation to power, from broken to whole, from forced alliance to chosen forever. It was a better story than she'd ever imagined, and it was only just beginning.